we seem to have a lot of children in the chat, by which I mean people who are like under 25. People born this millennium. That's so young. So very young. That kind of child. I doubt many 13-year-olds are like, oh boy, I need to see the vampire with the funny eyes that's going to talk about the Warhammer. Actually, I can see how that might appeal. They're not my demographic, though. Ah, yes. Well, a lot of people got into Warhammer in the last, 5 years, I guess. The Plague Times did a lot for, what if I just stayed inside and painted some models? Before that, they were seen as oh, people don't do this, they're weird and odd, and no, that probably is still the mainstream opinion. But it was seeing things like, oh yeah, the guy in the 40-Year-Old Virgin film is painting some models that are basically Warhammer. Or that's like the situation. It's Wargames models. People are playing with Wargames models, and they're weird. But now we're cool? Potentially. We're more mainstream, which is interesting. Oh yeah, Dawn of War. Yeah. A lot of people got into it with Dawn of War, which was 2004, I think. So people were like, this is a cool game, and then series of games, and then they were like, and now I like the Warhammers. But people thought it was more of a turn. People didn't get at the tabletop much, because you do need to know about painting and gluing and all the rest of it. And then there's the lore, which is more of what we're doing today. But the lore has changed a lot. I don't know how long Bricky has been into Warhammer. The furthest back I've heard him mention is like 7th edition. I can't imagine he goes back much more than that. So he may also be one of these children. I don't know if I want to just deliberately mispronounce words today, and that can be a thing. It was because I was playing a Terminator game, and at one point I actually called them a Terminator. Just completely butcher the pronunciation. I was like, maybe I should call them Terminators all of the time. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. Oh, the memes. Yeah, a lot of people will get into 40k for the memes. So I'm wondering at some point if I should do here's all of the memes you know about 40k and why they're all wrong and don't apply to the lore or the tabletop or a lot of other things. But they're funny memes. You just need to know the memes to keep up with. Burn the Heretic. Burn the Heretic's pretty self-explanatory. Anyone can say burn the Heretic. Your friends got you into it from school. Wow. And here's me, who's been playing since, I don't know, 1996, 95? About then, just before the Battle Sisters came out. And I've been playing continually since then. It's a lot of Warhammer. So it's nice that it's become mainstream. It's like, I can take the thing that I know a lot and just feed it to people. Yeah, that's going to be good. So it kind of worked out like that. Bricky did some memes with Matara. Good. But was it explaining like the origin of the memes or that the memes aren't real? Because I'm hoping that it was, this is what the meme actually means. But we'll see. Hello all of the Dawn of War 1 folks. Oh yeah. I think Dawn of War 1 is my favorite. Dawn of War 2 and Dawn of War 3 were very different games. Space Marine 1 when you were 13. That's when it came out. Like December 2012. That's when I first played it. And it was a lot of fun. And then my disc broke because it was a PlayStation 3 game. So it was based on a disc. And so I bought another one to replace it. And then they turned off the servers eventually. So you couldn't play the online mode anymore. Which is a shame. Because they had like Dreadnought fighting. You have Dreadnoughts. You do so much, you get a Dreadnought, you can slap the enemy around a bit until they pull out a melter gun and then you die. Or las cannons, also very unfortunate. It was fun being a Dreadnought. You just have the worst player on your team be a Dreadnought and they would be really good at it. Now you love Halo. Oh yeah, playable Dreadnought in Space Marine 2. In Space Marine 2, I don't much like the Dreadnought missions because it's a lot of, the Dreadnought is really cool, but you just follow around the dreadnought and it kills stuff and never runs out of ammunition. What does it have? The heavy flamer and the big Gatling cannon? Yeah, I think so. Whereas most people play with the mini Gatling cannon and the big plasma cannon. That's just the kind of Redemptor dreadnought I've seen on the tabletop, because I do all the tabletop stuff. Dawn of War 1 dreadnoughts. Dawn of War dreadnoughts were fun, because they're the boxy dreadnoughts. The Iron Coffin dreadnoughts, where it's very obvious that it's a box dreadnought. The best kind of dreadnought, my favorite kind of dreadnought. I'm less fond of the bigger ones with the bigger legs. Castaferum, that's it. Or Castraferum. Iron box dreadnoughts. Yeah. Eldar are good. I've gotten more Eldar recently because the Eldar came out in the Combat Patrol magazine in the UK. So I have a Wraith Knight. No, not a Wraith Knight. Smaller. Wraith Lord. And Fire Dragons, because you got new Fire Dragon models. And Guardians, so they're on my desk in various forms of building. And then I also thought, if I'm painting stuff, why don't I paint more Battle Sisters? Not basic Battle Sisters. I have enough basic Battle Sisters. But a few more Repentia, Penitent Engine. Trying to do something different with the Penitent Engine. Because my thinking is, what if you could treat Mortifiers like you would Repentia? So while you have, say, Repentia being followed around by a Mistress of Repentance whipping them, what if you had Mortifiers that were followed around by a Mistress of Repentance in a Penitent Engine, like, chassis, whipping them? That seemed like a cool idea. It's not working out great because of the size, but I'm getting there. Otherwise, I'm making a Repentia model with a grenade so that I keep remembering that the Repentia have grenades. It's a keyword they have, and you can throw grenades. So it's really good. Craftworld Ulthway's the best. They fight chaos. They have the Black Guardians, so they have the whole... Yeah, even our basic militia are as good as, if not better, than your elite troops. And then they have the really nice Psychers. Yeah, Ulthway's the best. Perky is putting together 70 Battle Sisters now. Good. Zerota doesn't have a single squad of Battle Sisters. There was a time this edition where I said, you don't actually need Battle Sisters. Because they... Did they have sticky objectives all the time? I don't think they did. I'm gonna check. 10th edition. Saved documents. Imperial codexes. Battle Sisters. Battle Sister Index. Battle Sisters from the Index. This is a very different looking thing to the Codex. So many different rules. Right, Battle Sister squads. Ah, yeah. They did not have the sticky objectives. The Simulacra Imperialis at the time, if you destroyed an enemy unit, you got a Miracle Dice. If you controlled an objective at the end of the command phase, then you got a Miracle Dice. Now all the Simulacrums do that, and the Sisters have sticky objectives. So, that was where you didn't really need Battle Sisters. You could have all Dominions, so I recommended Dominions at the time. No one was buying Penitent Engines? Wow. Hello, Justin. Yeah, Miracle Dice on objective was their special ability. And also the banner was, I killed a unit while carrying the banner, so I get another Miracle Dice. That was good for Dominions especially. Good. Okay. This is enough chatting. I think we've had 10 minutes. We have people here. That's nice. More people will join as we go on. So... Thank you, Wenbin Tan. Thank you very much. Leon Hart says, you just built your first Castigator. Is it ever worth building the Battle Cannon? I like the Battle Cannon. I initially didn't have... I wanted the twin autocannons, but I used the Battle Cannon and I got used to the Battle Cannon. The Battle Cannon's good. I think it is worth it. The two gun turret options are about equal in power. One's slightly more range, one's guaranteed shots, the other's random shots. It's entirely up to you. Your people. Yes, you are indeed people. Yeah, make it swappable. Don't glue it in if you don't have to, and I don't think you do. So it should be either push fit or easily magnetized, yeah. Same as like the immolator and things, you can just pull the guns out and put other ones in. Okay, so what we're doing today is a little bit different. It is a reaction video, and I don't really do reaction videos unless I can take a very small section of something and then expand it so far. So I reacted to a Warhammer video where they briefly mentioned, oh yeah, and something should be in the Genestealer Cult Combat Patrol when it comes out. And I took that one line and made a whole video about what is likely to be in the Genestealer Cult Combat Patrol, what should be in the Genestealer Cult Combat Patrol, what I would put in the Genestealer Cult Combat Patrol, and ultimately what's going to happen with the Genestealer Cult Combat Patrol. And it was kind of close. I was kind of close on that. No, wait, no I wasn't. Because it ended up being all fast attack stuff. Yeah, my version was better, because it was some pure strains, some first generation metamorphs, some like second generation acolytes, however you want to do the acolytes and metamorphs. Then a squad of neophytes, so you've basically got 5 Genestealers, 5 first generation, 5 second generation, 5 third generation, 5 fourth generation, and a Nexus. And I thought that is a really good introduction to the Genestealer Cult, especially around all of the infantry, which is how you play Genestealer Cult. Yeah, do I have the word... Oh, I do have the word VTuber React in the title. That's fine. That's fine. Good. Right, so the idea of this... It isn't a, oh, I hear you're doing reaction videos now, Mr. Carmian, which I think of in the same tones as, oh, I hear you're a racist now, Father, from Father Ted. And no, it's not like that. This is going to be a bit different. So, Bricky, several years ago, made a video about an introduction to Warhammer 40,000. The idea being, he liked it a lot, some people had seen the memes, didn't know much about the background and lore and didn't want to dive into like an extremely in-depth explanation of one minor Space Marine chapter that no one has heard of before. Even the people who play that Space Marine chapter, who just like, I like the way they're silver and have swords as their symbol. I don't know about their lore. Don't care. So this was a video that a lot of people started with to get them into 40k. As it was an introduction for many people going from the memes and the video games to the tabletop, because it had some explanation of how the army worked on the tabletop, very briefly, which was usually they're kind of like the lore, or the space orcs are like orcs, the space elves are kind of like elves. So Bricky has now done a new video re-explaining each of the Warhammer 40,000 factions, because anyone on YouTube knows, if you have a really well-performing video, you should do it again, or do a sequel, or both. And VTubers everywhere prepared to react to that one. Well, this new one, yes. I don't like doing reaction videos generally for another reason. If you watch someone's reaction video version, then that isn't views going to the original version. It doesn't matter so much when they're incredibly popular and they're getting hundreds of thousands of views, and they'll probably be on about 1 million by the end of the month. If not sooner. I think the video's on like 600,000 at the moment. Let me check. Yeah, it's on 640,000. So it's gonna be fine. It'll easily get to 1 million views. But if someone had like 1,000 views and that was amazing for their channel, and then people with bigger audiences watch it and get like 20,000 views, then the YouTube algorithm is going to push the reaction version rather than the original version. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a lot of people who would never see the original if not for the reaction, which is why it's got to have really good information in it. And not just be, here's a cool thing that's about my life, subscribe to my channel. As a reaction to that, it doesn't work. You don't get the filtered down anything to the original person. So it's fine in this case, especially because I emailed Bricky and said, is it okay if I do a reaction? And he said yes. In fact, he encourages it to let more people know about the Warhammers. So I prefer to do things with permission before I enter. Vampire rules apply. But I'm just not some VTuber who's like, oh, this thing is popular, maybe I'll react to it and do, well, yeah, head nodding. And so, oh, that's interesting. Haha, he said a funny thing. No, I'm going to be stopping this every now and then to expand in great detail on what he's already said, or to see if there's anything that's like, that doesn't sound correct. Is it not correct because it's for new people, or is it not correct because he doesn't know any better? So we'll see. The original video is 2 hours, and that's another good thing because it means that my streams, which usually go for 3 hours, then into 3.5 hours, yeah, and they can just spiral. This one is going to be about that length, maybe. Yeah. So we'll see if we can be in and out in 3 hours. That's the goal. Even though that sounds like I'm starting the Lord of the Rings movie and be like, I'll just watch this one. We'll see. Yeah, I know a lot about the Warhammers. So I'll be adding more lore information, more tabletop information, some petty technicalities if I really want to. And then we'll see what the fleshy people like better. Oh, it's nearly 5 a.m. Yeah, you can stay up until it's time for work, and then maybe by the time this stream is ended, it'll be time for work. Maybe. Someone starts a 2,000-point game and see which one takes longer. That's a good point. It depends on the players, because even tournaments are like 2.5 hours to 2 hours, 45 minutes to finish a tournament game of 2,000 points. Oh, it's I do not know the days. It is at the moment. Sunday is tomorrow. Saturday's usually bad for like getting audience people, but we'll see how this goes. Maybe this will be somehow, for some reason, hopefully not, my most popular video, and then I'll end up doing reactions to loads of other things. But we'll see. Now, there may be adverts popping up for you on YouTube. If that happens, what you can do is in the settings, you can set the playback speed to like 1.5, and it will catch up to where I am in the live, so you don't actually miss anything. There's also going to be some potential adverts within the video itself. That's just so at least some amount of money will get to Bricky through advertising through me doing this. That seems nice. So we'll have to bear with. And that's also going to give me a good spot to be like, I like this or whatever. Yeah, there's YouTube Premium game. Well, I don't have YouTube Premium. And there's 2 ways of running OBS. One is to do like a screen recording, which I can't do because I have so many things that I need to work on the screen that I'm looking at as well as the thing itself. The other way is to have it as an in-source browser, so it's running off its own browser thing. Okay. So I know a lot of people have gotten into 40k, or it helped you a lot, within the video itself. He does gamer subs in this one. I haven't watched this video, so when it comes to that section... When it comes to that section, we may skip it if you like. I might do a little poll thing on it. It might be one of those, oh, this is actually a funny advert, or it could be a, yeah, this is the sponsored segment. We should go through this. Right, so this is going to be all about the lore. Let's just pop it up. It's a funny advert. Good. Then we may look at it. Right, so we don't need that anymore. Do that. Do that. Yep. Now you should be able to hear it when it actually starts playing. I will put it in full screen mode. There we go. I don't need to be covering up that much of it. I can just cover up the tiniest of corners. That should be big enough for you all to see. Turn unused sprue into ice cream. That's an interesting choice. We're going to get the most random adverts because this isn't connected to any person. I'm not signed in or anything. It's just going to be whatever it thinks is interesting. 20 memberships? Revan, that's so very kind of you. That's a lot more people going to get memberships. Okay, now have I got my order thing right? So that's going to be above. Yeah, they've got to have me, then that. Yeah, that's in the right order, so nothing's going to be overlapping for itself. And any donation, tip monies that come through the Ko-fi link, which is in the description, that come up from the blue bar at the bottom, as you've seen earlier in the stream, that will nicely cover my face. So you will be able to see that, and anything that pops up there, I will be able to read out. All right. I think we're ready. The lore is going to come from a lot of places. When 40k lore is written, there are inconsistencies in it because everyone who creates part of the lore, whether that's in a codex or a Black Library book, they don't necessarily check every other source. Especially when some of these were written, there wasn't like a lexicanum online for people to check up and see, oh yeah, what's ever been written about the Beastmen in Warhammer Fantasy. And so they'd make their own thing. It's like, oh, this is inconsistent. Well, I didn't know at the time, and I had to write a book in 3 months. They have absurdly narrow deadlines. I know this because I've talked to quite a few of the authors at Black Library events. Some authors deliberately alter the lore. Some of them change the lore to be like, oh yeah, this needs to be different now. Hence, the Necrons having personality. I wonder if we'll get to the Necrons in this one. This is part 1 of 2. Part 2 isn't out yet. If it's a redo of part 1, we'll be looking mostly at the Imperium. I have a lot to say about the Imperium, of course. Alright, let us begin. We have... The sound is on, so you should be able to hear it. If you can't hear it, then let me know after it starts. We haven't got the background music on. We just have my voice. Excellent.
In the kind brightness of the far past, there was no war. Our galaxy was, for a long time, fairly empty and quiet. The first known species to appear during this time are known only as the Old Ones, cosmic entities that traveled across the galaxy with ease and seeded life through the stars.
All right, so we have
Shortly
the Old Ones,
thereafter,
which are never
a
really
new
shown.
species began to arise.
They are more of a Warhammer
the
Fantasy
Necron
thing.
tier. Evolving under the harshness of a devastatingly powerful star, the short-lived and irradiated Necron tier try to find the secret
the Old
to
Ones were the ones that
eternal
made the
life
slang
and to be
in Warhammer
freed
Fantasy, the frog
from their
people.
terrible
And
existence.
then the frog people made the
As
lizard
they
man
expand through the stars, they find the
they had
Old
the lizard
Ones
man at
and
the
they
same time.
plead to
No,
them
the-
to share
doesn't
the
matter.
secrets of the universe and
Necrons.
grant them purchase from their short and painful existence.
They
The
all had
Old Ones
radiation sickness.
respond with a lull and a lamau, and with their immense power, they force them back to their homeworld. The Necron tier, filled with
remember if there was
rage
ever
and
like a good
hatred,
reason
make
for
it
them
their
to
duty
not
to
give
get
the
revenge
Necrons more
on
power.
the Old Ones.
I think it was more
a revenge
if
that
they
would come
create life,
swiftly as
they
a
want
chance
to
encounter
make
with
their own
other
version.
gods gave them a solution.
That's
These
an old
other
model, but
gods
it's
were
also the
known
most
as the
recent model for it.
Votann, a race of highly
the
powerful
Nightbringer.
star-consuming entities.
Death
Do
itself.
not fear, young mortals, for
Can't hear you
we,
well,
the
Reserve.
Catan,
Okay, let
will
me
provide you with
turn
the
him down a little bit.
immortality you seek. Come now. Won't
That better?
you shake a poor sinner's hand?
There we go. Then you should be able to
Quoted
hear
from
me a little bit
Nephetron,
better.
The Deceiver. The Necron tier accepted the Catan's offer of immortality, but believe it or not, this turned out to be a ruse. A trick. The Catan crafted gigantic furnaces and began the process of biotransference. The Necron tier willingly walked
No, I can still commentate while he's talking, or I can pause it if need be.
made by gods who devour stars and had their souls consumed instead. The short-lived, irradiated, and cancer-inflicted race of the Necron tier ceased to be, and the immortal, soulless Necrons remained. Now back.
So the Necrons, based on the Terminator films, because it's a Terminator kind of character. 1 new membership, thank you very much. So, we're going over the basics of the Necrons. The way that it works in 40k, you have 3 parts to you at any one time, in theory. There's the body, the mind, and the soul. Each of them are separate. So you can have your body destroyed, but still be alive and able to think, and your soul is still fine. Or in this case with the Necrons, their body is destroyed, their soul is devoured by the gods, and then they still have their mind, at least some of them in some part.
Backed by the immense power of the Votann, the Necrons rally against the Old Ones, and the bitter conflict in the stars at this time is known as the War in Heaven.
Oh, good, he said it.
Despite creating various races and entities to aid them in this battle, the Old Ones are over.
Okay, so he's probably not going to mention the entities. So this is where the Old Ones were creating their own different creatures. Humanity being one of them is assumed to not be true. What with generally it wants to be like our current reality could become the 41st millennium. They're not retconning human history that's already existed. People like Shakespeare and Plato do get mentions in the 41st millennium, or at least in 30k, because Magnus is a big fan of both Shakespeare and Plato. So the Old Ones created the Eldar and like the Quarks, which are the predecessors to the Orcs. Smart, but pure violence. They're very good fighters, so they're used to fight the Necrons. So really, the Necrons have been fighting the Orcs, or something like the Orcs, for millennium. Well, in the War in Heaven.
And eradicated down to the last, due to the sheer power of the Votann, fat off the souls of the Necron tier, and with an army of unthinkable robotic slaves at their behest.
Not unthinkable, unthinking.
The Votann are greedy, spiteful gods.
Is that
old
art?
There was no foe worth
That's
killing,
not a pariah, is it?
On each other. The Necrons then put their sights towards
no, it's one of the newer teleporty
and
guys.
lay waste to them, securing their freedom. The once subservient Necrons now control their former masters. Worn out and weakened by these wars, the Necrons under their leader Zarek, the Silent King, lie dormant with a plan to eventually
Jakaro being a test run for some other things. Could be.
The galaxy. Over millions of years, empires rise and they fall. The species created by the Old Ones have footholds over the galaxy, but on a pale blue dot in the
Okay, he's going to talk about humanity next. So the Necrons' plan was basically, okay, we've won the War in Heaven. However, all of the children of the Old Ones are still around. Races like the Eldar, who write things down like, hey, we fought this race called the Necrons, they're still around. The Necrons' plan was just to wait it out. The Eldar seemed like frail and mortal, unlike the Necrons. So if the Necrons went to sleep for, say, 60 millennium, they should wake up and all of their enemies have died of old age. Essentially, their civilizations have gone to dust. Kind of the reverse happened. Because in the intervening 60 million years, the Eldar hunted down as many Necrons as possible. I don't know if he's going to go to the Necrons in more detail later in this video. Hopefully he will. And then we can talk about things like the Rangers. One of the main things that the Eldar Rangers do is find tomb worlds and destroy them. So you get like Ranger kill teams. That would be a good expansion for Kill Team, the game. Here's a Ranger kill team. Oh, we already have Rangers as a plastic kit, multi-part, pretty recent, so we won't get that. But that's a cool thing you can do. Fighting the Necrons and destroying Necron tomb worlds and tomb places. If I don't look, all my problems will be resolved. Exactly. If I leave them alone, hopefully all my enemies will die. Actually, it's maybe comforting to know that everyone you hate will die. All of your enemies will die. Your sacrosancts beat 2 war dogs. That's very impressive. I assume mauls rather than the halberds, but never mind. Right.
Think of all this
humans.
Conflict, humanity begins to evolve. And for the most part, the basic path of humanity's evolution remains the same as it is now for almost 15,000
Warhammer
years.
follows along
now,
with our
in
timeline.
The 21st century,
we're in the 3rd millennium.
Canon. You, right now, Twitch streamer reacting to this
Twitch
video.
streamer? YouTube streamer, actually, who streams on Twitch.
Time, humanity's ambition and the power of their technology becomes unmatched, and the golden age of expansion begins. Humanity starts to branch out through the stars with powerful tools used for agriculture, mining, and expansion. Some branches of humanity would eventually settle far away from Earth itself, and around this time, the psychic ability of humans are greatly expanded, and what we begin to know as psychers appear. But despite all the progress...
Okay, so the initial expansion of humanity was not great. It was like, you can't travel very far, or you need generation ships, and all of the the things you see in many sci-fi things at the moment. No warp travel, except we know there was a warp. It was a very calm warp. However, the safe routes through the warp could only be found by attrition. So you try one route, and if the crew come back and they're not wibbled, then it's fine. You can carry on through that path a bit more. The way the warp routes work at the moment in the 41st millennium are based on those very initial warp routes. So there's a lot of things around Terra are safe warp routes. There are fewer and fewer further out. The reason you also need a warp route is to go between planets. So the Grey Knights are an exception, but you can go from one end of the galaxy to the other. It will take you many, many months. Therefore, you need to stop to take on more food and more people, because some of them will have gone a bit wibbly. And then the replacements are needed, so you need to have these stops along the way. So there's always some good planet you need to be at. Think of the galaxy as like a series of Polynesian islands. Some of them are habitable, and it's only so you're going to travel to the habitable ones, travel between them, even if it's longer than going direct to another place. It's something discussed in ancient history when it comes to navigating the Mediterranean. If someone was going to go from, say, modern-day Macedonia over to Carthage, which is Tunisia, do you go straight across the Mediterranean to get there, or do you go up the inside of, what is it called? Up by Serbia, and then go down Italy, and then inside Italy? Yeah, the Adriatic Sea, thank you. Yeah, do you do the east of the Adriatic Sea, and then down Italy, and then you cross over from, like, Sicily? Because then you have ports all the way along. If you get into trouble, you can go straight there, because there's people there to help you. So early expansion in, like, the first few millennium, it's slow, it's dangerous, lots of people die, but humanity expands in the stars, and then you get Psychers, and then you can have Navigators. And that's from the Matrix Revolution?
As the Cybernetic Revolt.
The third one?
Would begin to collapse due to the
Cybernetic Revolt it's mentioned a few times in the background of 40k, but usually only as an explainer as to why there are no AI. There are no thinking machines. There are servitors, which are very different. Maybe he's going to talk about servitors. Hopefully he will. Hopefully. Otherwise, I'll do a bit on servitors if people remind me at some point later into, like, his Imperium section. Yeah, so the main reason that we mentioned this is just to say we don't have AI, we just have servitors. And so the Tau, who have AI, are like, yeah, this thing that's happening, this can happen to you. The machines will rise up and fight against you.
The immaterial warp, aka actual hell, beginning to cause ruptures in space and time. These warp stones would separate humanity, and this would be what is known as the Age of Strife. The warp, a sea of souls, storing all thought, emotion,
the warp
and
is
the
messy.
souls of those who have passed
People
on,
go wibbly on it.
fluctuating into something terrible, as far on the horizon, something horrendous was brewing. You see, the warp isn't a random assortment of chaotic energy. It is fairly well organized.
Chaotic energy?
Living in the galaxy. The warp itself acts as an afterlife of sorts, and the actions of the innumerable amount of creatures who live in the galaxy have manifested a pantheon.
I don't know about calling it an afterlife, because there's not really a life after death. You don't really exist much in the warp, because so many races have like a survival beyond life itself. The Votann do it, where they upload their minds to the machine. The Eldar have a whole separate thing that we'll get into. Warhammer Fantasy, well, Warhammer Age of Sigmar works a bit different, because there is a god of death, Nagash, who you can play on the tabletop, who organizes the, like, beyond... yeah, all the afterlife stuff. So it can be, if you believe an afterlife exists, that manifests as a physical place within the realm of death. Warp doesn't quite exist as an afterlife.
Of organized entities known as the forces of chaos.
I wouldn't...
At their
chaos, but organized?
Major
Yeah, okay.
entities. Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch.
I know why he's
However,
mentioning just three.
Fourth one, Slaanesh, was about to be born. The ancient Eldar were one of the first
that's some
species
old
created
Harlequin
by
artwork.
the old ones, and due to their
Very
extreme
pretty.
and unbridled excess,
That might be first
the birthing
edition.
of Slaanesh tore a hole.
See that one in the top left? The American Harlequin. There you go. There's your Joker character.
In the galaxy, and forever split the Eldar into those of the Craftworld, who sought
Can
to
demons
bring their
inhabit
species back
servitors?
together,
Yes.
and
I see no
those
reason why
of
not.
the Drukari, who wish to continue what caused the birth of Slaanesh in the first place. The birthing of this fourth chaos god settled the warp storms of the Immaterium and ended the Age of Strife. But humanity...
Yeah, that was a big thing. With the Age of Strife, there was also a lot of warp storms, which scattered, well, it made like pocket areas of, if you think about the Cicatrix Maledictum now, which is this massive tear in the galaxy, there are lots of planets that exist within that that are not just swarmed by the warp. But we can't get to them because they're surrounded by the warp. So you have that in the Age of Strife, where humanity is now lots of separate fiefdoms, all existing within their own thing. So when it comes to the Great Crusade of the Emperor in the 31st millennium, the thing that leads to the Horus Heresy, then you get a lot of places that are like, I see no Emperor, there is only me, my family has survived here and run this planet for the last 20,000, not 20,000 years, like 3,000 years, which is a very long time, however you think about it.
Was still fractured. So one man
Slanesh's warp storms got rid of all of those extra things.
Attempt to reunite all the fractured pieces of humanity. That man was the Emperor of Mankind. After reclaiming the nearly destroyed Earth, the Emperor embarked on the unification wars to unite humanity under the
first thing you got to do is unite Terra, and because of the Age of Strife, people were techno-barbarians. So that's where you have barbarian warfare,
not the same.
But
to reconquer
cool
Earth, the Emperor would need more
tech.
than mere men. Great beings, known as the Thunder Warriors, were recruited by the Emperor.
Thunder Warriors whose models are based on the very first Space Marines, like goggles and top knots.
Tool and had
There we are, goggles.
Overstayed their welcome. He would need something better, and that solution would be known as the Space Marines.
So them being better or not is debated within the lore, especially the Horus Heresy lore. In theory, a Thunder Warrior is stronger and better than a Space Marine. They lack many of the organs, they don't have as many abilities, they're not as loyal. It's more like you get rid of the Thunder Warriors and get the Space Marines in the way that in Star Wars, Emperor Palpatine wanted the clones until he realized that, oh yeah, someone else could swap out the clones and make them attack me with Order 65. Better to have a new set of people that are loyal.
Superhuman soldiers that will have the skill and cunning.
I recognize that. That's last.
Mortal man. These new warriors
No, Secret
would
Devil.
be commanded by an elite group of his very own sons, known as the Primarchs. Unfortunately, though, Daddy didn't charge the baby monitor, and his 18 sons would be stolen by the forces of chaos and scattered across the galaxy. This would begin the Great Crusade.
Two of them disappeared. Yeah, and then the Great Crusade is, well, we're going to expand anyway. The legions are already made from their DNA, so you have all of the legions already fighting in this Great Crusade.
Monumental
but now you need to find the
take back
Primarchs
the
again.
Stars in the name of humanity and reclaim the lost.
That's the Blackstone
Primarch
Fortress.
sons.
They weren't found at
However,
this time.
He would need the fires of industry to make this happen. Looking to the distant cousins of Mars, the Emperor signed a treaty with the technologically irradiated hellscape of the Red Planet and allowed the cult of the Machine
Yes,
God,
two of them were
the
disappeared.
Mechanicum, to supply his crusade. While Space Marines were the tip of the spear, their numbers paled to the vast might of the Imperial Army and Navy. The Astra Militarum and their seemingly endless numbers make up the bulk of the fighting force for humanity.
It wouldn't be Astra Militarum yet. They would be the Imperial Army.
Of various agents of the Imperium.
I mean, I think what he's doing at the moment is telling you what all the things are in the 41st millennium through the story of like the timeline. So the Astra Militarum did not exist at this time. It would be the Imperial Army, which was very different in its makeup and organization because we hadn't had the Horus Heresy. When it comes to the Astra Militarum, that is just like the foot soldiers, the infantry, the tanks, the artillery. It is in no way connected to the Imperial Navy. The idea being the Imperial Army, in great parts, was able to turn to Horus and be heretics and stuff because they were one entity. So immediately you have all of the ground troops you need for an invasion, and you have the transports to get them there, and you have a fleet of ships to blow things up, and you have all the administrative people to organize that. So in the 41st millennium, after the Horus Heresy, they said, okay, no, we split them up. There is the Imperial Navy, there is the Imperial Guard. These are totally different. They have to liaise with one another through intermediaries. You can't just call them up and have it work perfectly.
Such as rogue traders and assassins. Due to the lack of connectivity between the worlds, what a society had become over thousands of years became
Solar Auxilia.
mysterious and varied. Tools once used for harvesting and agriculture now are being
these are the
used
Imperial
as
Knights
machines of war in the form of Imperial Knights. Some of these fractures of humanity would even be changed further and become unrecognizable to the average human, with different.
I hope he's going to mention more on the Imperial Knights, because in his previous version there was not a lot. Cat ears? Yes, the cat ears. There were a lot of abhumans. I have talked about the felinids before, where there's one planet called Luther McIntyre, I think, if I remember correctly. That's where the cat ears, that's where the cat girls live, the felinids. And it's debated about what they are because there's only 3 paragraphs of lore on them, if that. There's also beastmen who are loyal to the Imperium, except maybe not because they're persecuted. And then you have ratlings, which are space hobbits, and you have ogrins, which are space ogres.
Some would go so far.
And then you have space dwarves.
Own galactic societies, like the miners of the galactic core, and their immense.
And because they live near the core, then more
the
gravity,
Votann.
you become smaller after generations and stuff.
And books.
A lot of books.
The Emperor would be reunited, and the Imperium of Man would be firmly
The
established.
Horus Heresy was a very, very long book series.
Would not last. Be it intentional or accidental, the Emperor would not reveal to his sons the true nature of the galaxy and the terrors of the warp. And this oversight would result in one of the most impactful wars in humanity's history. The favorite son of the Emperor, Horus, would fall to the powers of chaos
Heresy.
and turn on his father. This betrayal, this backstabbing, this heresy.
Oh. There's the first advert, which should be easy to skip. There we go.
This Horus Heresy.
Yep, he said the thing.
Result in a split in the Imperium with devastating consequences. Half of the Emperor's loyal sons would fall to chaos and become the Chaos Space Marines, along with the forces of the Dark Mechanicum and the Chaos Knights. The conflict would result in the absolute obliteration
That's some cool old artwork. I like that artwork.
The Emperor himself.
I mean, the newer stuff is better.
Body of the Emperor would be placed
He's not
on
dead.
The golden throne
He's just
to serve as a
asleep.
beacon of humanity and allow
sort
for the
of
continued ability to travel the stars, protected by his most loyal, the Adeptus Custodes. The Imperium.
Are we going to mention the Custodes more?
This age of rebirth, and Terra would.
Because the Custodes are the bodyguard who stay within the Imperial Palace. They always stay within the Imperial Palace. However, then in the more recent stuff, it's like, oh yeah, we want to sell these models and not just for the Horus Heresy game. So they spread out in the galaxy.
Under siege by one of the most formidable species in the galaxy, the Orcs. As time went on and memories of the Emperor's vision began.
There's nothing more? Nothing more on that? Hang on.
The galaxy, the Orcs.
Okay, there's going to be no more mention of the War of the Beast. So let's talk about the War of the Beast. Oh, some people are very young. Right, so War of the Beast, that was when we have some very smart orcs called the Beast. It was a whole weird book series as well. You get the first ones that it's like, okay, I see where it's going. Because the War of the Beast is a relatively small section of lore. First came out in connection with the epic 40k game. It's now been redone as Imperialis. So this is where, in White Dwarf magazine, which is a monthly magazine that Games Workshop produces, there was a lot of battle reports and things about Epic. They then made that into the War of the Beast, set in the 32nd millennium. So this is where the orcs are smart, the orcs are doing really well, the orcs are sending moons, and then in the books, there's like, yeah, we destroyed the moon. And then it turns out a book later, oh yeah, there's 2 more giant moons, attack moons, and it just kept going on. The Imperial Fist chapter, because these are chapters at this point, not legions, the Imperial Fist chapter of 1000 Space Marines was wiped out to a man. And then in a later book, he was killed. So that means that in the current 41st millennium, there cannot be any Imperial Fist who has lived since the Horus Heresy. In theory. That was when there was a council that got together and said, okay, we have all of these Imperial Fist successors. Do we want to have the original Legion actually represented? Because we can just take a bunch of our people and reform the Imperial Fist. And that's what they did. And then together with Vulcan, they killed the Beast. And then a book later, it turned out that wasn't the Beast. That was the Beast's friend or the Beast's dad or the Beast's twin brother. And then they killed the Beast again. The book series went on very weird tangents with a lot of different authors. I just need to close the curtains a second. Come on, tracking. Track my face. There we go. We have face tracking again? Good. Yes, War of the Beast.
Time went on, and memories of the Emperor's vision began to fade. The Emperor would become less of a head of state.
I mean, humanity's united.
A religious figure, and the Imperium would change to reflect this. The leadership on a planet would be at the behest of the High Lords of Terra, and their actions
lesser
would be
extent the planetary governor.
of the incomparable power and authority of the Inquisition. The zealots of the Imperium would intensify and create a brand new era known as the Age of Apostasy. And this ecclesiarchal command of the
we're going to talk
Imperium
about Goj Vandaya.
one of the strongest fighting forces of Terra, the Adepta Sororitas. Over time, this age would come to pass.
Oh, that's all he's got. Okay, that's the section on the Age of Apostasy. All right, let's talk about the Age of Apostasy and Goj Vandaya. So, we are reuniting with the Imperium generally after all of the wars. Still, some planets have not been reunified since the Unification Wars at all. So we need to tell them, hey, you know, the Imperium's out there, and do you want to be part of the Imperium as it is now? Because planets do get separated continually. There's more warp storms and things like that. On a planet called Ophelia 7, we find these warrior nuns. They are called the Brides of the Emperor. I think they call themselves the Brides of the Emperor at this point. Think of modern-day Repentia in the 41st millennium. So, I was going to go back and... Well, okay, he'll maybe talk about Battle Sisters a bit later on in this video, but I don't think he's going to talk about the Age of Apostasy in such detail. Think of modern-day Repentia. That is how the Battle Sisters... No, not Battle Sisters. Brides of the Emperor were equipped. Massive chainswords, running around screaming, horrifying to all of their enemies. Goj Vandaya is like, I want them as my bodyguard. So he tricked them and he was like, okay, I am actually the Emperor's chosen servant. You should serve me so that you can be closer to the Emperor. They're like, you what, love? I doubt that. So then he had one of his subordinates shoot a las pistol at him, and then his refractor field activated, which caused bright light. Oh, they were the daughter of the Emperor, and Goj Vandaya renamed him for the Brides of the Emperor. Yeah, your bride shouldn't be your daughter. Those two shouldn't be the same thing. But aside from that, I get it. Daughters of the Emperor, then they become the Brides of the Emperor, then they become the sisters, who were also the daughters. Anyway, yeah, so the refractor field activates, bright lights everywhere, he is suddenly divinely protected, and these daughters of the Emperor do not know what a refractor field is. We know it as the reason that the Minister and Priest has a 4+ invulnerable save on the tabletop. Then they decide to follow along with Goj Vandaya. He takes over the High Lords of Terra. He becomes the supreme authority, and there's a civil war. There are a lot of civil wars in the Imperium. From Armageddon, after the First War of Armageddon, there was basically a little civil war between like the Grey Knights and the Space Wolves. There is the whole Maelstrom War. There's the Badab War. Many, many civil wars. Just so, you know, there's all of the fighting. Yeah. So Goj Vandaya does a civil war. The Space Marines are like, that's not cool. The Custodes mostly do nothing. They get to the Imperial Palace, or the High Lord's Palace. Then the Custodes turn up and say, hey, sisters, the Emperor wants to speak to you in person. So like 6 of you. So the leaders of it, these 6 sisters, went and saw the Emperor. We don't know what was said. Something, maybe. And then the sisters switched sides. They went and murdered Goj Vandire, and his final words were, "I don't have time to die. I'm too busy." And then he was killed. Then a rule was put in place to say, okay, the ecclesiarchy should not have a military force capable of, like, fighting the Imperium. So we'll get rid of that. There is a rule, no men under arms. And as an exploit for that, they were like, okay, we'll have no men. Wink. And so we have the Battle Sisters, who were an all-female order, working under the ecclesiarchy. It's technically separate, but not really separate. Yes, that is the decree passive. So that's where you get the no, it's no male soldiers. However, we still have, like, guided wars of faith, where you have Fraternus Militia, Arco-Flagellants, Penitent Engines, where the ecclesiarchy is definitely not in charge of this military force. They're just free, independent citizen militias, guided by the ecclesiarchy to do wars of faith. And then the Battle Sisters will supervise. Okay, let's continue.
And we would approach the 40th millennium of Warhammer 40,000.
We got to the 4,000 Warhammers.
Which, you guessed it, would come with its own form of problems. A primitive species once found during
the Tau get a mention?
would be able to evolve in relative secrecy for 6,000 years, becoming a highly advanced coalition of aliens known as the Tau Empire. And if the threats of the galaxy weren't bad enough, there are threats from outside the galaxy, as a monster has begun to wrap its tendrils around.
Okay, we're sort of speed running stuff. So
Tyranids,
yeah, we have the Tau sort of there in the background. The Tyranids appear right at the end of the 41st millennium. You have a lot of other things. Yeah, the end of the 41st millennium got messy because a lot of stuff happened at once. The Eldar were like, we need to do more stuff and get a god back. That's where you get the Inari. Then the Necrons started waking up in much larger numbers. We'll see about that when the Necrons come back. And then the Tyranids invaded in, like, the very last century of the 41st millennium. No. 745, so that was 255 years before the end of the millennium. And you had Genestealer cults about that time, with the first one being found by Chaplain Cassius and Kill Team Cassius. Can still use them in 40k, under legend rules in the Death Watch. They found the first Genestealer cult.
Tactics previously unseen in the Milky Way, be it a direct assault with their monstrous bug-like presence, or through the more covert Genestealer cults.
Genestealer cult mentioned.
Threat in the galaxy is proving to be
there was a lot of nice Tyranids.
To the Imperium. In the 41st millennium, there is no peace among the stars. At any point, your life can and will be threatened by the Xenos races uncountable, or by the arch enemy of chaos within.
Yeah, it's not a fun time to be. Yeah, Imperium is probably the most likely to kill you of any of them.
The cruelest and most bloody
he's saying the line. He's saying the line.
The power of technology and science, or the safety of
so much has been lost.
Understanding. For in the grim darkness of the far future,
there is only war. Okay. Very good intro section. Hence we get an advert about orange juice, but it's grim orange juice. Is that screaming?
A fantastic job once again, Mr. Kurz, the Night Haunter himself.
Oh, is this the advert bit?
Didn't you love that, my faithful audience? Once again, we have another criminal over the course of 6 hours.
I'll do a poll on it.
Every single bone in his body, and with that, once again, our glorious leader has brought the crime rate to 0%. Always brought to you here on Nostroman News. I'm your host, Bricky. Thank you once again for joining us. Our top stories.
There's a poll to decide if we're going to skip this section or not.
Appears to be rainy with extra dark, so make sure you pack those extra batteries for your lamp packs. And of course, let's not forget the fantastic gang violence problem we're currently having. Oh, I'm sorry. What's that? Oh, right. It's gone.
Seems to be on no at the moment, so
It's looking to be a
we'll see what he has to
tonight
say
as well,
because,
so
you know,
make sure your
it'll be
skin
fun.
capes are nice and tight.
House parties are better.
And then we have a second advert about pizza to go with our juice. And a bus? At least it knows I'm in Britain, which is maybe too creepy.
Wait, hold on, one moment. No. Adamantium reserves have tripled? Wait, I'm sorry. Self-harm rates have gone down to 0%. The Night Hunter
An ad within an ad, yes.
smiled? No. This could only mean one thing. It is the Strawman News' great privilege to bring some color back in your life with the brand new 3-part Gamer Subs drop exclusively on this here news.
Okay, now
network.
it's actually becoming
That's
Gamer
right,
Subs.
Your esteemed host Bricky, myself, is dropping a 3-part Gamer Subs release.
Well, I'll let it run because, you know, I am reacting to his thing rather than him getting anything particularly out of it. Out of this. Other than more people knowing about it, I guess.
One of the highest selling flavors in the entirety of Gamer Subs, but it also comes with the first ever all-over print Gamer Subs 32-ounce jug. And if that isn't
You
enough
get a
for you,
jug.
if the phenomenal drink
I've never
and
been
drink
super
holder
into
is
Gamer
not enough
Subs
for you, we have
because
a
it seems
Designate
like
to go along
it's
with it.
flavored
That's
water.
right, the
You're
Herculean
mostly
look
selling
of the
flavored
brand
water,
new sweet
unless there was a Von
style
Carmian
is
cup
here.
for
We're
the
still
flavored
looking
water.
at muscles beyond
It's just
belief,
flavored
but
water.
This time, we're talking taste. We're talking Atlas. We're talking smooth. And if that wasn't enough items, we'll porting this
I am going to skip it now because this is actually quite long.
Video and click the link. Save 10% off with a cross-string the strong. Ago, I made
There we go.
every Warhammer 40k faction explained. A passion project of mine
You
for
can
a
steal a
universe
cup.
that I enjoyed so much. Its main purpose was to be a drawbridge, the separation between the layman who had only ever seen the big
I wonder if
armored
there's going to
blue
be
man
someone who's like,
situated
and
next
here I
to
am
Alexis
reacting to the
Pretzels,
previous
and
version of
then
me
the
reacting to the
hardcore
previous
Warhammer
version of this
lore
video.
nerd. That was just too wide.
Gamer
and there
Subs
was nothing
cult.
bridging these two together. Since 2020,
ship, yes.
Warhammer has exploded in popularity thanks to COVID, quality game updates, and a few excellent video games.
Quality
and
game
a
updates.
couple miniseries. The sheer volume
Well, I mean, there's new
of
models,
people
and a lot of the
who
models are
told me they
nicer.
have purchased miniatures due to that video alone makes me feel as if Games Workshop owes me
I
commission.
have had quite a few
However,
people say, I
that
collect
video
battle
is
sisters because of you.
incomplete. I was not
And
a
that
casual
is
fan, but I was also not a hardcore
worrying that I
Warhammer
have such
fan.
influence.
In the 5 years since that video's release,
But
multiple
okay,
channels have
there's more
sprung
people
up,
playing
and the
Battle Sisters and
drawbridge
G-Stealer
between
Cult now.
casual to the
That's
obsessed
good.
has never been wider or easier to traverse. Even I, myself, have been a part of Adeptus Ridiculous, a podcast teaching lore in a much simpler and condensed
are
form. Needless to
still-
say, Baseman shoots big gun. It has also grown substantially from its origins, being a Warhammer Fantasy spin-off just in space. Now,
Yeah, but as soon
it
as
is a
Warhammer
black
40,000 came out,
library
it
filled with
very much
immensely deep
outstripped
characters,
Warhammer
difficult
Fantasy
themes,
in
and even some
popularity.
tear-jerking stories. It is a backdrop for a million stories
Mm-hmm.
over a million worlds, and I did not see its true depth in 2020. But now, I'd like to share what I've learned. We just had a brief summary of the world and each faction that takes place during it. And we did
Bridge.
that because to truly understand each faction, we must understand what makes them the way they are. And to do so, we need to begin in chronological order, discussing their origins, their culture, their powers, and of course, what makes them oh so grimdark. So let's begin
nothing about
with
the
group
tabletop
that
this time.
started all
All right.
and sing praise to the infinite empire.
Yeah, we're back on the Necrons. Okay. So it's going chronologically
As
again.
mentioned before, the Necron tier
Does that
were
mean
the
the sisters are
original
last?
form of the Necrons,
Ooh, might
an
be.
alien race far away
They might
from
end
us
up
that
being
lived
next
short,
time.
painful lives due to the irradiation of their star. Normally, this would manifest as like a sort of cancer, a space cancer of sorts. The Necrons are very
Radiation
much
sickness, I would
inspired by
say.
the ancient Egyptian aesthetic, but unlike the
I
windswept
mean, you also have the
dunes
Thousand
commonly
Suns with the
associated
ancient
with it,
Egyptian
the
aesthetic.
irradiated
A lot of
hellscape
people
the
like the
Necrons
ancient
here
Egyptian
endured was,
aesthetic.
far from
Tomb
picturesque,
Kings.
this also translates into their hierarchy. They are a race of nobles and peasants. Most of the peasants would often live for their very
Even
short
in the
amount of
earliest
time,
times, like the
only
2nd edition,
couple of
3rd edition,
decades,
4th
while
edition,
the nobles tended to have
there
better
were
care and would live
there were
a
lords
little bit
who
longer,
had
but
some
still far
semblance of
less than the
thought.
average lifespan.
Although the original Necrons back then, well, 2nd edition was Necron Raiders, who were just some random guys who turned up out of nowhere with mysterious interests. They would destroy something or kill something or drag someone away, maybe. Then they would disappear themselves. Even if you beat them, they would phase out and their bodies would disappear away into nothingness. It was the idea of they're like in the Terminator film. So they have the rule, I'll be back, which is an Arnold Schwarzenegger quote. So they get back up when you destroy them. Very, very hard to get rid of in the early editions. You needed like gene stealers to tear them apart. They were Terminator, like Space Marine Terminator level. Not the film, and also the film Terminator level. And then you got into like 3rd edition, 4th edition, they have their own plastic range. There's more units. The lords have some thought, but they are slaves to the Catan. And then you get 5th edition, which changes the law, flips it on its head and says, actually, there's even more units, and the Catan are the slaves of the Necrons.
Of a human, even today in the 21st century. The leader of the Necrons was Zarek, the Silent King. He was the one who took the deal with the Catan and the Deceiver. Of course, he wasn't aware of the fact that they were known as the Deceiver at the time.
Deceiver wasn't like put on his head or written on his base.
After
I
being
see.
debased by the old ones on their quest to cure their illness. The sheer pain that underwent the Necron race can't be understated, as their fear was manic. The Catan are, of course, gods that eat stars, and when the leader of your species tells you to march into the gigantic green furnaces to ascend to immortality, you march. The scenes from these are long lines of both the peasantry and nobles clutching their loved ones in a frantic act to save their own lives. Many of them already
all of
inflicted in the
them
late stage
wanted to go into the furnaces. There was only one person who didn't, and that was, I think, Oricon the Diviner, who was like, this isn't going to end well, guys. I do not want to go in there. I would rather live my, 30 years of life and then die. But he was dragged in, and he was the only one to be dragged in. Everyone else was like, we willingly go into this.
Stages of this space cancer, some of them crawling into the biotransference furnaces, trying to outrace death itself, without realizing death was the one who made
And
these
then they
to begin.
become death. Oh
What
yeah,
came
big,
out the other side
man with
was a
scythe
soulless
made that.
husk. And I say that literally. A soul is not an abstract concept like it is in our world. An immaterial version of oneself discussed and debated in religion.
That was
and
about the size of like
philosophy.
second edition
In Warhammer, a
armies.
soul
You would get
is a
about 6
real,
units, and that was the
tangible
army.
item of oneself. And the Catan basically
But then, we
were
have
just like
Votann and World Eaters at the
to
moment.
every single person who went in their furnaces. If you were a peasant, you came out a Necron warrior.
And if you were a
as an
soldier,
individual
an immortal.
have ceased to be. You have no mind, you have no soul, and your body, as you know it, is made of an extremely advanced mass of re-knitting living metal known as necrodermis. You cannot think for yourself, for you do not have a brain to think with. All you do now
You have
is await
obedience.
protocols from your overlords, which are the nobles who came out of the furnaces.
Yeah, the
with their
Scours were
minds
bombs. They were
intact,
horrifying
not
to
their
tear apart
souls,
tanks.
mind you.
They could kill
because-
tanks really well.
But their minds are very
Even
much
now, they
intact.
have you can
These
detonate them
nobles
for
now
some
have
mortal
command
wounds. So
protocols,
it's still
and
there
they are
in
able to
like
command
elements.
all of their peasantry and do with them whatever they wish. Zarek, the Silent King, is the most advanced of all
right.
the Necrons.
They
A
could have had their memories
perfect
messed with. I
metallic
see.
version
Very good,
of
Revan.
himself with incredible power and intelligence. His strength allowed him to lead the undead and the unthinking armies of the Necrons to battle
There we
against
are.
the Catan
Unthinking. You
when
said
they were
unthinking
at
rather
their
than
weakest
unthinkable.
due to their
Good.
incessant infighting, and then win back their freedom. But gods cannot die. So in reality, what occurred is the Catan
Yeah, well,
were
gods can
shattered
suffer a
into
lot of pain.
thousands of
This is something that happens with gods and any immortal character in fiction. They get captured. So it used to be a whole thing in like ancient Greece. There were many stories of like, oh, why does this town exist? Oh, well, we were a tribe at war with this other tribe, and we didn't want to be at war anymore, so we captured Ares in a net and told him that, you know, you make us a town and we'll stop the war, otherwise we're not letting you go. So the same sort of thing. You capture the Catan, you break them into pieces, you control the pieces.
And each shard of their guard
and that explains why you can have them on the tabletop.
Vault and mind controlled to do the bidding of the
Tortured.
Necrons they
Let's say
once
just
enslaved.
torture it.
The biggest challenge they face now are actually the upstarts of the galaxy. The Eldar and the Orcs were quite prominent.
Yeah,
and
the
as
ones
you
from
can
the War in
imagine,
Heaven.
A galactic war really takes its toll on the joints, or I guess the servos. It was in their best interest to wait out the galactic rise of the other races and
let
come
the others
back at a
rise,
more
die,
opportune time.
and then
So
you can just
they
get
went
back up.
into stasis via these massive tomb complexes hidden beneath various worlds.
Tomb worlds,
biding
tomb
their
citadels,
time until it was
tomb
once again
mausoleums.
their opportunity to rule the galaxy. Zarek, the Silent King, as penance for his failure to his people, exiled himself into the darkness between stars for the next
Oh yeah,
60
they have killed a
million
Catan.
years, with his perfect memory a constant reminder of the doom he inflicted upon his people. Flash forward to the modern day, and the Necrons are reawakening, but
Necrons
it
are getting
isn't
back up.
working as well as it could be. Whether the tomb world is reawakened naturally or by some imperial moron stepping on a green glowing rock, the Necrons have come back
Yeah,
to
what's that? The AdMech's at the door. Oh no, we have to get up. So many tomb complexes have been destroyed by the Eldar, the elements destroying them, stuff like, yeah, we didn't realize this planet was going to end up moving into the sun. And so there's like a dynasty destroyed because the planet with the tomb world on went into the sun and they weren't awake to deal with it. Even their little canoptic creatures might be not working. And then when you are reactivated, not everyone's there mentally, and I'm hoping he's going to talk about some of the things like destroy
the
curse.
galaxy they consider rightly theirs. But 60 million years of hypersleep have taken their toll. Many
Sleeping
Necron
is
dynasties
bad? No,
awake with
sleep is
systems
good.
unrestored, and huge swaths of their population's minds completely lost. Necron nobles wake with various mental faculties compromised, sometimes exhibiting traits similar to excessive paranoia, schizophrenia, or even dementia. One notable Necron, Nemesaur Zandrek, believes that he is still back on his home planet fighting off separatists and interlopers. See, Oberyn, the separatists come, attempting to outflank me as they did at the
Oberyn is
Fourth Battle of
his
Vindach.
bodyguard man.
How they calculate that
I think they
dogging
still have
themselves
legend
green
rules.
and roaring like savages will produce a different outcome, I cannot fathom. But it is of no account. Ready, my legions. Another glorious victory shall soon be ours. Other individuals, such as the esteemed Imhotep the Stormlord, seek to usurp the newly returned Silent King for
Imhotep the
rightful ruler
Stormlord
over
in the
Necron
newest
race, believing his
Parianex's
time has
Crusade
come to
book
an end,
is
while
doing a civil
scientists
war
and
fighting against
archaeologists like
Ceres,
Trajan the Infinite
Ceres,
and
the Silent
Orkin
King.
the Diviner spend thousands of years bickering over
And then we have the
artifacts
Infinite and the
petty
Divine
squabbles.
messing
Truly,
about.
The Necrons
Good
are
book,
a
that one.
faction of
Infinite and the Divine.
unthinkable, unimaginable power held back entirely by their own hubris. And 60 million
Yeah, so the explanation of why there's so many Necrons, why haven't they just won, is because they think of each other as more of a threat. This was a similar thing because they are based on the Warhammer Fantasy Tomb Kings. Tomb Kings come back, and rather than having this wave of undead crush the world, they're like, oh, well, I was king at this time of this place. There are now 20 other kings who were also kings of that same place. So then you got to have a war, and then you get Cetra the Imperishable, who takes over in the end as the king of kings.
years
In
of
this
stasis.
case,
It is a
Necron
species
Civil
that
War.
does not know of time, only of the ravages brought by it. A
9th
pharaoh
edition
of a
trailer.
dynasty may just be as frightened to awake completely mad as they are to be assassinated while they sleep. Thousands of years pass in an instant. There is a play, like an opera play, a retelling of the War in Heaven in the Necron culture that takes 40 years to witness, because why leave? You
Is
have
that
no
Harry
need to
Potter?
eat
I
or
assume that's
vacate your
Harry Potter.
bowels. You are immortal, but you are soulless. Despite the Necrons'
Well, you might as well.
incredible
Only
technology,
people who
their
are soulless enjoy
mastery
plays.
over time, reality itself. Despite all of this, they still are missing a soul. And therein lies the
No
biggest
soul,
struggle. Most
no
Necrons
soul,
look to conquest
no
the galaxy,
soul.
kill the interlopers like the humans, Eldar, and Orcs that scrape at a fraction of their power. But the end goal for many, including Zarek himself, is to return the souls to their bodies, to undo the horrible fate he cast upon
Control
them.
Z.
This is not the interest of all. Many simply wish to rule their dynasty with an
Oh yeah,
iron
some of them are
fist
like,
and
hey,
kill
like
all they
Imhotep the
consider
Stormlord, he's like,
unworthy.
I
But to
like
many
being
others
a
is
super
to
creepy
undo
warrior made of
the
metal.
decision that
I'm gonna
doomed
keep
them
this.
all. Before they can do that, there is a
Tyranids?
pest that needs exterminating. That is the fundamental understanding of the Necrons. They are so hyper advanced that their
Yeah, the
science
Tyranids are a
borders on
problem
magic.
because they eat
play
everything.
with the fundamental aspects
And then
of
there isn't really a
reality
planet.
and time. Their mastery of the physical galaxy is the strongest in the universe. Their weapons reduce people to the barest molecules, and they have devices capable
Gauss
of
flares.
causing stars to supernova. They are unfathomably difficult to kill, as if you
The amount
do
of
fell
things
one
in
of their
like
number, the living metal
the
remnants,
plots
self- and
around
the
like the
reanimation
Pariah Nexus
protocols allow it to
involves
come back
the
alive
Admech and
once
the
again.
Necrons
Their
throwing
masters
planets
of
at each other.
teleportation and often
It's
killing
really
the Necron
crazy.
fully will just have its consciousness translocated back to their tomb world to await reassembly. Normally they utilize large phalanxes of warriors and honorary
warriors.
combats, but some of them have fallen to various mind viruses.
Oh good, we're gonna mention all of them.
Destroyer cults are
I read
hell-bent on
chat.
killing anything and everyone that lives with an overwhelming force. And then there's the flayed ones.
Occasionally.
Necrons cursed with I have no mouth and I must scream, a panic attack virus, as the last
Yeah,
laugh
well-
of Landogo, the Flayer Catan.
Yeah, so the Flayer Catan was destroyed, didn't get made into small bits, just stops existing. We've also had many other gods, like Eldar gods, who are destroyed. I assume they're going to come up relatively soon. So the Flayers and the Flayed ones, they were like, hey, yeah, if I wear skin, I feel better, but also don't because it doesn't actually fix the problem. It just feels like
Slowly
it
losing
does,
their
and so
minds,
give me your
they
skin.
strip apart their foes and adorn their bodies with the skin of their enemies, trying to better return to their old feelings of flesh and blood. The Necrons are a degraded version of their
Yeah.
mighty
Oh yeah, all those
empire, and
weapons that
still
Admech
one of
don't
the
have.
biggest
Yep,
threats in
they
the
use them.
galaxy. The only thing keeping them at bay currently is their awakening sickness and their infighting with no care to the timeline. But they are coming. And slowly, they plan to rid this galaxy of the vermin that inhabit it. My people shackled the stars.
Necrons
and
are a
broke
big threat.
mortality
Well,
when the species
especially in
you
8th edition.
sprang from had
No, 9th
barely
edition.
left
9th
the
edition was when they got their
slime pools it
refresh.
spawned in.
Then
Our
the plots
wars
kind of slowed on them.
burned
It's just
reality,
stuff's
and
happening in the
dominion
Pariah
of our
Nexus.
kings is without
Some
limit.
stuff.
The ground you tread on
But
is
we'll see.
not yours.
And then you have a
it
War of
is
Faith,
ours.
as
The
they have a
war in
whole thing that
heaven
like
was a
stills
catastrophic
people's
time for the
souls,
galaxy,
but
and
Faith
as
is a great
stated in the
resistor to
above
that.
quote, burned reality. Of course, souls exist in Warhammer, and in the case of the Necron tier, they were consumed by the
Gonna
star
talk about
gods.
Slanesh?
This begs the question,
Chaos
however,
Gods?
if you were to pass on, expire, as one might put it, where would your soul go? The answer to this is the warp. In Warhammer, a soul is real. And so is hell, the afterlife, the Empyrean, the Sea of Souls, the
There isn't really a
Immaterial.
heaven.
All of these names refer to the dimension parallel to our own, known as the warp.
Which
Now,
is different
the
to
warp is
warp
not
travel
our
in like
reality.
Star Trek.
It does not follow the classic normalcy of time and space. It is defined as the Sea of Souls, and it acts like this in a more literal way than you can realize. To imagine the warp is to imagine the sea itself. Hell is real, and you can surf on it. It has a current and can become more dangerous depending on where you
Little
go
dude.
and how bad the weather is.
They did a lot
As
more
the
with like
Immaterial is a
Psychers and
reflection of
Blackstone.
our
Previously,
reality and
Blackstone
of
was
our
just
souls.
it's
All
a stone that's
thoughts,
black.
all
Then it became the
emotions, all
anti-Psyker stone,
feeling that
or the
goes
Hyper
with
Psyker stone, depending
a
on if you
soul
turn it upside down.
is
And you
passed
play that
on into
in
the
Space Marine
warp. If
2.
an entire planet
With the very end,
decides
where
it's
you can
going
turn
to
the
engage in a
pylons
blood-fueled
upside down or
rampage
not.
of murder
And it either
gore,
makes more
then the
psychic stuff
warp
happen or less.
around that planet will be affected in a similar manner.
How
It's
many
not something
armies
you
do I
can
have? About
see.
11.
It's a parallel,
A lot.
not perpendicular dimension.
A lot.
But it is changing. To expose oneself to the warp for any period of
Don't
time
go
invites
into the
certain
warp.
death outside of the most iron-willed of individuals, and to stare into it will drive one mad. Much like the open seas, things dwell in the warp.
It is
Whether
very
these
much a
beings
here
were
be
always
dragons,
there and were just
also here,
emboldened by the
and
carnage
here,
of the galaxy, we can
everywhere.
only speculate.
Almost
At
everywhere.
a time, you could say it was more calm. but a certain faction's galactic war in heaven didn't do it any favors. Now the warp is turbulent, and its realms belong to a pantheon of gods known simply as
Chaos gods? Demons? We're doing demons next? We're doing whatever that is next. The orange juice is back. Chaos. Pure chaos orange juice.
Chaos are beings that serve directly under their patron deity. There are 4
Turn a Necron upside down to stop being alive again.
Khorne, Tzeentch,
No, they're not made of
and
blackstone.
Slaanesh. Each of them represent various facets of and emotions of
I have
sentient
some Age of
species
Sigmar,
and
but
play
they're
a
also
great
Warhammer
game
Fantasy armies.
against one another for
Like,
total
one uses
control
the other.
over their realms. Interestingly enough, while
And
their
I have
disciples have physical
Battle Fleet
forms, we
Gothic.
can understand the Chaos Gods do not have a physical visual that you can perceive in reality. So while
There's
there
a lot
are
of art.
tons
Oh, well, there's all the art.
fantastic fan art, we do not know what they truly look like, though they are conveniently color-coded. Khorne is the god of blood and murder, carnage,
violence,
and
and
slaughter.
stabbing,
He is the
and
one
also
who has
honor.
most power by the wholesale killing
And
of any
stabbing.
living thing. For Khorne cares not
Murder.
from where the blood flows.
The god of murder.
With a sacred number of 8, he is the lord of all things involving killing and blood and gore. The champions are extremely strong as well, with monumental muscles and extremely large
Khorne
weapons. A true
hounds.
analog to Khorne
Hates
would be his
psychers.
greater demon, the Bloodthirster, an enormous muscle-bound flying
dude
devil
with
with
an
an
axe.
axe so
Standard
large
demon.
it splits tanks in a single swing. They move into
Sort of,
battle with
the idea
armor
was
of
Khorne
brass,
came from the
adorned by
first
skulls
murder.
of their foes and pools of
Not necessarily
freshly
first human
spilled
murder,
blood.
but like,
This may
if
appear
you want to make
be
it more
quite
biblical,
frightening,
sure,
of
it's
course,
Cain and Abel.
demonic, one might say. But in the world of chaos, all emotions feed one of these gods in one way or another. If you were to define Khorne with single words, you would use blood, carnage, murder,
Yeah, the
skulls.
positive
But you'd be missing
sides
out
are
on
more of a,
important
like,
ones like strength,
fantasy stuff.
honor,
In 40k,
prowess,
they're, like,
courage, and
messy.
skill. Khorne is not just
But
about the
some of their
wholesale
leaders
slaughter
are
of
like,
people.
hey, you know,
He is about
don't run
the
away.
honor
Some of their
and
stratagems are
power
like, if
of
the enemy runs
martial
away, you
combat.
damage
The
them more.
true strength there is
How do you spell Von
investing
Carmian?
someone in
If you look at
physical
my
strength and skill.
YouTube,
of course, a murderer
has it
would be
everywhere.
someone who would feed Khorne, but a soldier
Like, if you
could
click on
feed
my
Khorne.
name,
A martial
or
artist
hover over
or
my name, it has the
professional
spelling.
fighter could feed Khorne. A warrior, good or bad, feeds Khorne.
Chaos
A
juice.
diplomat does not. A premier soldier does. A GoFundMe does not. This is what leads many mortals down the path
Does a
of
Ko-fi
Khorne,
help
for he will
fund
bless
Khorne?
those that bring him enough skulls,
Ko-fi
and he'll
link in the
work
description
this
for Khorne.
destructive. There are many ways to reap a high tally for him. Prepare the Dreadclaws and unchain the Mad
Dreadclaws
Ones.
being like drop
Glorious
pods,
battle
the Mad
awaits
ones
us today.
being
For the world below
Hellboots,
has refused
which
to
are
surrender.
crazed dreadnoughts.
Let us descend upon them with fury and rage, giving no quarter and sparing
Kill,
only those warriors
maim,
who fight
burn.
well enough to earn a place amongst us. As to the rest, their lives and
That's a lot of
possessions
armies
are
in 2
ours,
years.
but their skulls are for Khorne. Normally, if I ever want to
So,
explain
you take the
Khorne,
stuff.
I just kind of show them this clip.
This clip represents Khorne.
I'd never stab you in the back, Shepard. Warriors like
Easy
you and
jet.
me, straight to the face.
Moving on,
EasyJet is
Tzeentch
pure
is
rage.
The second god, the god of trickery and mischief, the changer
That was
of
fun.
ways, the great conspirator and the architect of fate. With a sacred number of 9, Tzeentch is truly the god of change in all of its forms, but there is an obvious undercurrent of mischief and cunning. Tzeentch is such a liar that his
Tzeentch
pants
is
have
like,
gone thermonuclear.
if you've seen Jury's Game, which is the little Pixar short that happened at the end of Bug's Life,
His
where
favorite
it's one guy
pastime is
playing
asking
himself,
questions
that's
that
like
have no
Tzeentch.
answers while simultaneously making up answers on the spot
Oh,
to a
that
question
stuff.
he didn't ask.
Have you ever had a dream that that you could do
Yeah.
so
Tzeentch won and then was like, do over.
You want
Too easy.
him to do you so much you could do anything.
He is such a conniving little bastard that every emotion of lying, of scheming, of trickery is a direct way to help feed him. An unfaithful partner, a politician, a spy.
You agree with the
All
child.
of these people feed Tzeentch in one way or another, and it doesn't matter if the intentions are good. Acceptance does not feed Tzeentch. Change does. Tzeentch doesn't care about your
Wanting
facts.
a better
He only
life
wants opinions.
helps
Because he
Tzeentch,
represents
but it's
change,
usually
he
like,
also represents
this
hope,
is
though. Schemes are
road
always
from
bad,
good
and
intentions
even the hope
leads
make a
to the
better
demons.
tomorrow is the change
Just
he
accept
seeks.
everything that's
Because he is the
horrible
architect
about the
of fate and
Imperial.
the mastery of
Then
sorcery,
Tzeentch doesn't get
his
anything.
presence is purely unknowable. Every depiction of a Tzeentchian demon contains more eyes than are necessary and more mouths than I know what to do with. It is a biblically
Fire,
accurate
eyes,
angel if the
birds.
angel gaslit you into thinking birds are government drones.
They're not.
But are they? The creatures at his disposal
Like even the little
adorn
ones.
themselves with the knowledge of sorceries and the unknown, all to
You
provide
got
a
the big guy,
mind-crushing experience.
Fate Weaver?
Fighting demons
One
from
of his
outside
heads sees
our
the
reality
future,
is
one of his heads
difficult
sees the
enough, but
past.
fighting
He's very
demons from
vulnerable in the present.
unreality, purposely attempting to trick you, is a whole new thing entirely. And that is before we even get started on the gigantic bird of sorcery you're going to need to
Big
face.
bird of sorcery.
Do not ask
Weirdly
which creature
well,
screams
they
in
manifest
the
as
night.
birds
Do
because
not
they need to
question
be a
who
physical
waits for
model
you
on the
in
tabletop.
shadow. It
If
is
they
my
weren't a
cry
bird,
that
then
wakes
you
in
could
the
have
night,
anything.
and my
This pile of
body
Play-Doh
that crouches
is a
in the
greater
shadow.
demon of Tzeentch.
I am Tzeentch,
Stick a
and
couple of
you
feathers
are the
on and yeah,
puppet
there you go.
that dances to my tune. Third of the Chaos Gods is the one of acceptance of rot and pestilence, the grandfather himself, Papa Nurgle. Nurgle is the exact opposite of Tzeentch, where Tzeentch believes in change and hope for a future.
I always liked
Nurgle
Khorne as a
believes in
child
stagnation
because I
and
could
the
get
end
behind the
of
art. I understood it. It was like,
everything. At one point
it's the
or
fighty
another,
man
we
in the
will
fighty
all
game.
decay. We will
Of course I'm
all
gonna win.
Rot, and we will all end. And with a sacred number of 7,
I wonder if
every
Vashtar's gonna get a
single
mention.
thing,
Not a Chaos
pestilence,
God,
spoil, and
but
everything in
maybe.
between comes under the great shadow and girth of Nurgle himself.
Papa
For Nurgle, the
Nurgle.
plight of mortals is his fear and wine. And no matter how solid life
Gonna
might
die.
be,
Don't worry about
everything
it. Don't
will
worry, be
decay
happy
in the
is
end.
the
In the
Nurgle
creation
approach.
of life, there must be an end to that life. And nobody has more creations to end lives than grandfather Nurgle himself. Every boil, every blemish,
They
every
like Nurgle as a child because the
wound
Death
and
Guard.
disease, every
Death Guard's whole
and
thing-
every plague is kept
Don't know if he's
and
going to go into Death
concocted
Guard. I assume
by
he's just going
Nurgle.
to stick with the
This
demons for now.
humorously
But it
keeps
was like,
Nurgle as a
okay, yeah,
jovial
Space
god.
Marines
He
are
is
immune
full
to
of life
disease,
and laughter,
but they can
and by
suffer
creating as
so
many
very much.
diseases as he
So if
possibly
they
can,
accept
he
Nurgle,
shares that
they keep the
joy
disease,
with
but they
mortals.
no
I mean,
longer feel pain
his
for it.
envoy is the great unclean one,
And then you
look
can
at
spread
how
the disease.
happy he is.
But yeah, your
And there's
body's
a
going to be
lot,
bloated. You'll have all the
a lot
symptoms,
of
but
him
you
to
won't
love.
die.
Just
A
tip
fear
10
of
Kofi
death
for the Kofi
in
God.
general is
Thank you
feeding
for the
Nurgle.
Kofi money for the
All
Kofi God.
disease makes him stronger, but to pray for salvation for a wounded loved one is to feed Nurgle. The timeless and inevitable fear
Mortarian,
that
I like
one
the
day you will
fly
rot and
wings on
decay is what
Mortarian.
gives
Very
him
nice, very
strength.
thematic.
The Peloton won't feed Nurgle. Licking the doorknob on a public bathroom certainly does.
Yeah, don't
However,
do that.
should you
Don't lick
embrace
things.
Your
Don't lick things in
grandfather's
public.
Gifts, you may find an end to your pain. Maybe all mortal followers of the
Embrace
Chaos Gods
death,
found
and
themselves
then you
there
don't die?
in one way or another, either through the direct worship or the
A
slow
lot of fun artwork.
corrupting of their souls.
I mean, we're assuming
But
that like
those
the
that
greater
take
demons are
Nurgle's
made in the
gifts and
image
embrace
of the
decay
gods, so
of
we
their
have
bodies
a vague
may end
idea
up
of
being
what they're going to
chosen
look
among
like.
his few as a
And there has been in like
faithful servant.
the
In
very
doing
first
so, you
Warhammer
will be
Fantasy art
free
books,
of the pain
things
caused
like
by
this is what
Nurgle's
the gods
ailments, and you
may look
even
like.
find
And then you had
yourself
Malal,
just as jovial and happy as
who is
he
the fifth Chaos God, who is like,
his enemies shall wither
I like
and
chaos for the
die. His
chaos sake.
allies shall
My
wither
champions
and
will fight
die.
all
The
of the other
universe
chaos
and all
champions.
within it shall wither and die. And when the great corruption has settled over the land and permeated the very foundations of reality itself, then shall the Lord of all rise from the rot and ruin, spread his arms wide to reclaim all of his dutiful children. Those
And
were the three
grandchildren.
major chaos gods for a very long time.
well, there was
Emboldened by
Malal, like I
war
said, and then Malal was disappeared because having a faction that's like, hey, we are the people who fight chaos as chaos, it's basically what Chaos Undivided has sort of become. Generic, maddening, not in service to any one god. Although in Chaos Undivided's case, it is service to all of the gods, like the Word Bearers.
and death on a galactic scale, ever present, but now fact on the suffering of a galaxy. One race, for a while, was able to
One
elude
race
the
to
pull
ruin
of
them all.
chaos. An advanced race of psychically attuned aliens whose master over the physical
The
world was
pizza's
so
back.
strong that
It's not
chaos
just an
could not
advert.
glean from
It's the
them
pizza.
the morsels of power they once had, or so they couldn't. Not for a long while. 60 million years ago.
Oh, that is some very nice artwork of the Eldar. So we have the Wraith Lords in the back. They had a much bigger head. I have the metal models of those Wraith Lords. There was no Wraith Guard initially, but there's your Wraith Lords. You see the guys just behind his shoulder with the red helmets? Those are Dark Reapers. And then the ones with the yellow helmets are Eldar Warriors, who became Eldar Guardians. They are carrying lasguns, which in stat terms in the early editions were like the same as an Imperial Guardsman's lasgun. These are space elves. Space elves to fight the space humans.
Combat the Necrons.
That's cool.
And Votann, the old ones made a new species. One with innate
Eldar.
power in the warp and the ability to harness it with a
Or
mastery
Eldari,
that was
however you want to
unseen by so
count
many
them.
others. A mastery so powerful, the Necrons retreated
Second
to
edition
sleep
artwork?
in order to
Third
wait
edition
it out.
artwork? Third
It
edition
was no
Craftworld
longer
Eldar
a
artwork.
galaxy to be ruled by them, but instead begin the
Fire Dragon.
age of the...
The Eldar! Yeah, he's calling them Eldar. Good. Good.
The Eldar are a race of pointed-eared humanoids that are
The
all
American
psychically
Harlequins
attuned
back.
to the warp. If we're being meta here, these are space elves,
Yep.
and these elves ruled the galaxy in the time the Necrons went to sleep and humanity began to rise. The Eldar's empire was galaxy-wide and lasted for longer than any other galactic power that we know of. Their understanding
Spaceship
of all
from
things
Battlefleet
was
Gothic? Oh, there it is in the bottom
exceptional.
corner.
With
Battlefleet
every
Gothic
single one of
Armada.
them being psychers,
Eldar
they had the
Farseer.
ability to master the warp and use it to
6th
their
edition?
advantage. See, being a
7th
psyker
edition
is
Codex?
basically like being a wizard, or I guess in this case it's more of a sorcerer, since you are born with the gifts as opposed to learning them. In order to utilize your psychic abilities, however, you must then reach into the other dimension, into the warp, into hell,
Get some warp
for
energy.
that power. So if you were to say, cast fireball, your mind would reach into the warp, gather the strength
I don't
to
understand the
rewrite
children,
reality
but okay.
to then cast fireball. Now you might think to yourself, doesn't that mean if you are opening up a power to the warp, you may create a lot of risk to yourself because of all the horrible things we just talked about in the warp? Yes. However, in Warhammer 40k, willpower is a real, tangible thing in the sense that in
The
its
cone
own
heads
right,
are
it
fine.
can be weaponized.
Although you
Being
also have, like, the
strong of will
Custodes for
means
more
being strong
cone
of
heads.
soul, and being strong of
they're doing
soul
laugh, yeah.
means you can resist the pull of the warp that much more. A more inexperienced
Yeah,
psyker
the Eldar
opens
were
up a
around
hole
for
into the
longer
warp that
as,
is
like, the
large,
dominant
and that
galactic
hole
species.
widens to get more power.
Say, 50,000 years was how long their empire lasted.
Is able to open a very
And then we've had
small hole
10,000
with
years of the
immense
Imperium as, like, the
force to get
dominant
the same amount of power
galactic
with less
thing
risk.
after the birth of
Eldar
Slanesh.
are master psychers. Every single
Eldar
one of them
Warlock.
can call upon
Maybe
the
that
warp,
one is
and
the
over
7th edition
millions of
Codex
years,
art.
they have perfected it so much so that they can weave structures
Maybe.
out of it.
Yeah, maybe
In
the
some
Farseer was
species
6th
of the
edition.
galaxy, they utilize the warp itself for interstellar travel. The Eldar
Oh,
ain't
right.
having any of that noise.
The laugh
How about
thing
we
was some guy
utilize
yelling
a
lightning bolt
fancy
a lot.
alternative mode of travel that is substantially
I
safer
see,
than
very
the
good.
old ones created called the webway. What about dying? Miss me with that. We no longer age. And if we do, we can just be reborn like that. Food,
Elves
water,
don't age.
materials, we
That's
make
just a
things
standard
out
elf
of
thing.
distilled warp essence itself. We sing unreality into cathedrals to dine in. What
Fancy.
truly could the Eldari Empire possibly fear?
Themselves? I assume he's going to say themselves.
The Eldari Empire's biggest fear was themselves.
Oh, he's gonna say
The
themselves.
society
There we go.
So perfect, they wanted
messed
for
it up.
naught. And this led them down dark and dangerous paths. When the base
You're gonna
functions
remove
of
the cone
society are
heads.
no
I
longer
see.
a problem for you,
Very
you
good,
tend
very
to
good.
experiment. Perhaps the medium rare steak on your plate would be better if it was elf meat. Hey, I'm not saying we should make cannibalism legal.
They
but,
got
like,
bored and broke
what's
everything.
the issue with a little
That's another
taste?
explanation.
Violent
Yep.
sports is one thing, but
Fight to the
how come we
death.
don't do
Come back
sports
to
the
life.
death?
They
I mean,
still
if-
do that.
I
The
mean, I'm just
Drukari
saying, like,
Dark Eldar
if
still
both
do that.
Participants are willing and clear about it. Like, what really is the problem there? You know, art.
You can do actual
is
war
in the eye
games
of the viewer,
with
and what
people
is considered
and
art
war.
is completely up to the concept of one's own interest. A canvas adorned with the blood of a man wronged is truly the visual poetry.
Is that red
our
on black, or is that
society
some other
needs.
famous art piece I don't know?
Hedonism with a slow and consistent hedonism, the Eldar slid backwards into debauchery of the sort I cannot discuss on this YouTube video. Murder on stage, delicacies and drugs distilled from one another, the trade of slaves and concubines, and much worse. The Eldar physiology has their emotions heightened, and they can feel more than a human does. So while it can provide lows of pure despair, it can also provide greater highs than you have ever known. And
I assume we'll get to the Harlequins in a minute.
Was the Eldar game. The Warp took notice of this heavily, and it began to react. On a galactic scale, the debauchery and the hedonism of the Eldar race caused levels of warp storm so pronounced and so volatile that it cut off interstellar travel for all those who used it. Communications between planets was removed, and a nightmarish era of Old Night began. This continued for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. The Eldar all but removed from the problems being caused as they entered heights of more and more ecstasy. They needed more and more and more. Nothing was ever enough. More murder.
Yeah, this new Bricky video.
It's art, it's delicacies, it's life. This silence offends Slaanesh.
There we go. So you need some Slaanesh juice. Get your Slaanesh juice.
Wait.
The other Chaos God I conveniently didn't mention.
Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, she who thirsts, the god
That's
of
some weird
unspeakable
artwork.
excess, is our fourth Chaos God, with the sacred number of 6 adorning their title. Slaanesh is a bit of a tricky one, because with our other 3 Chaos Gods, there was a certain understanding of human emotions and desires.
Yeah.
But for Slaanesh, that desire is how they get their power. The words to be used would be decadence, pleasure, perfection, passion, excess, and
there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. I would say Slaanesh, especially in the way they're portrayed. Yes, we have the boob armor and the nakedness and the sexy times, but it's also all of the deadly sins, I would say, apart from wrath, are what you think of with Slaanesh. Like, you can overdo sleeping. So I guess the Necrons have been very tempting for Slaanesh, because the sloth, all of that sloth. Pride especially, that's the Slaanesh thing. Gluttony, very big. So many times it's like, yeah, and then they just kept eating to like celebrate the fact they survived the battle. And they kept going and kept going. So we have a new Age of Sigmar fellow. He's just a fat dude on a fancy throne being pulled around. He is gluttony. And then you have Sigvald, who is vanity. Because he likes to look at himself, he has the inside of his shield polished to like a mirror sheen so he can stare at his own face, which he thinks is beautiful.
More. The want to do more, experience more, become more. That's what gives Slaanesh their gifts. A lot of people believe that Slaanesh is something that originates with sex.
Crab claws.
Specifically.
Oh,
And it
okay.
makes sense
Yeah,
why
you
they
said that.
assume
Okay. I was
The
thinking crab
visuals
claws,
of
but
Slaanesh
crab
patrons
claws.
are all very lithe and sexual, but they are also
don't
intentionally
know about-
androgynous to appear attractive to a variety of intrigues. However, to think that Slaanesh specifically derives from sex would be mistaken. While
This
it
is pretty
true
well
that
edited.
A lot of
I appreciate the
humanity's
editing in
actions
this.
can relate to getting laid, and Slaanesh is the dark prince of desire. It's more on the lines of feeling an excess of an emotion. It is excessive touch and scent.
Too
and
much
desire.
sadness.
And a lot of that has to do with sex. That's
Too
why it
much
looks like
happiness.
sex, but it's more than just that. A patron of the arts may feed Slaanesh, one that aspires to become the perfect chef or master of their craft.
Anything to
and the
excess
sheer
will feed
pursuit of
Slaanesh, yeah.
That alone will feed Slaanesh. Whiplash is Slaanesh's absolute favorite film. Videos where people beat Elden Ring on a dance pad feed Slaanesh.
There are no 2 words in the English language more harmful than good job.
One of the things that Games Workshop's like rules writers mentioned in an interview about the Emperor's children and their new rules is, yeah, they are like the perfect warriors. However, they also get bored very easily and want to do something else. So when they were thinking of the army rule to give them, falling back and charging a different unit was what they went with. Because it's like, okay, yeah, I can just keep fighting these dudes and I'll win. Oh, look, there's a cool thing over there. I'm going to go get distracted by that. Whereas if they just focused down, stopped chasing sensation, and went to be like the best warriors, they would absolutely be the best and fastest warriors.
But is there a line?
No, man, no.
This also moves into the concept of feeling. Sensation is a majorly Slaanesh-coded thing. It might start off feeling good, but then you get to play around a little bit, you know? You play with a little bit of pain. Light pain might not be enough, so you might want more. Or inflicting the pain.
Yeah, and Siege of Terror, Fulgrim got bored and was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore.
May hurt your ears, and even then, that might not be enough.
Noise Marines.
You must
describing Noise Marines.
More. Many of the disciples of Slaanesh carry
gotta be loud.
In their
gotta be the most rockiest, craziest music ever.
Envoy, and their movements are a blur of dance and pain with an aura all the more fatal. They dance and sing, but there's always a form of malice behind every action they take. An alluring
Fancy hair,
gaze
Seeker of
that will
Slaanesh.
pull you in
Greater
right
Demon of
before the
Slaanesh.
demonic entity can crush you in that grip. Slaanesh's palace has 6 layers.
Slaanesh's palace was very much a Warhammer fantasy thing, and again is based on like the levels of hell in Dante's Inferno.
Foods imaginable.
Now you got the gluttony again.
Of delicacies and rivers of wine tempt the user to such a degree.
And you're meant to have the piles of gold, so if you wanted to do this for treasure, then there's treasure until you get crushed.
Familiar meat. If one does not see themselves drowning in the river of wine,
I don't want to read what the tags are. I can't quite see what that is.
That they cease to function.
Don't type it in chat. I don't want to know.
Becoming part of the banquet themselves. That is one of the 6 layers of Slaanesh's palace. This was the
it was very much
the Eldar
explored in Warhammer Fantasy, and then also copied over into 40k. So if you play Warhammer Total War, you can go and see something like Slaanesh's palace.
Every whim. Let lesser races feel the burden of their crude lives. We are beyond such concerns or worries. Every power is
weird
ours
parties,
to use. Every
weird Eldar elf parties.
Ours to experience. We are truly masters of the galaxy.
There's some tags,
all others exist owing to satisfy our curiosities. We have earned our position of power. Let us forever taste the fruits of such achievement. Time itself is ours to command. We are eternal.
Okay.
It's better outside with the Ninja Woodfire fan.
Oh.
House parties are better.
We're eternal. Eternal pizza. Okay. Cool. That's one way of putting it.
With the birth of Slaanesh, the Eldari Empire ceased to be.
The Crone worlds are destroyed. A lot of them survived, though.
Ripped a hole permanently in our reality.
Not all of them. There's like 90% of the race, or 99% of the race was wiped out. Whichever one you think is more grimdark. First of all, there was like the Exodites. People who thought, okay, these weird parties are starting where you're like eating each other's teeth. Stop it. We're going to ride dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are cool. So they go out and live semi-nomadic lives. They're wood elves. But they also ride dinosaurs and have lasers. Then you got the Craftworlds, people who towards the end were like, okay, the warp's got a bit weird. How about we get on some massive ships and leave because we can't just walk through the webway to all over the galaxy anymore. So get on the Craftworld. Let's go. Continent-sized ships, the size of like Asia and Europe and Africa combined, and then it flies. Maybe a smaller one would be the size of North and South America. Really big. Millions and millions of people there. Because it is the similar sort of like population density. Yeah, if you think of the population of Asia and Europe actually spread out across Asia and Europe, then you're getting about the size of a Craftworld. Then they left. In the web where you have the Drukari.
A fissure forever known as the Eye of Terror. With the sudden inhalation of this god's largest breath, the Eldari souls are a currency to be now collected by she who thirsts. Trillions of Eldar died in an instant. Slaanesh gorging on their souls to satisfy his palate. 99.9.
Oh, we went with he for Slaanesh. Slaanesh is also an excess of pronouns. He, her, ze, all of them. Slaanesh will take all of the pronouns. One of the other things about Slaanesh, they were created, there's another pronoun, They were created in Warhammer 40,000 by the Eldari. However, it's then, because of the way that the nature of the Chaos Gods work, Slaanesh has always existed, was always going to exist, will always exist, and exists in all realities. So even though Slaanesh was made in Warhammer 40,000, Slaanesh also existed in Warhammer Fantasy, and also Age of Sigmar, and so on. This then left a weird thing of like, oh yeah, okay, so they're just travel universes, so it is the same Slaanesh between the two different settings? Yes, is the answer. Then, I think it was Matt Ward in like the 7th edition of Warhammer Fantasy's Eldar book, and it was like, okay, no, not Eldar, High Elves. It explained that, no, the High Elves did it. See, there was this person who rides a Dark Pegasus, and her son, this is Marathi. And so it was like, yeah, they did weird parties, and that made Slaanesh in Warhammer Fantasy. And at that point, it didn't quite seem the same. It was like copy and paste. And it's like, oh yeah, we got soul stones, but they're not like soul stones. But they are. You've just tried to do 40k Eldar in Warhammer Fantasy. It's the mirror looking at itself. Wasn't necessary, but anyway.
9% of their entire species died.
So that's why you have like Slaanesh in
worse than death. For Slaanesh now stakes a claim
Total War Games
on each and every Eldar soul from the moment they pass
Eldar
on.
souls
An
are the tastiest.
of torment awaits them.
Or at least in Warhammer Fantasy, elf souls are the tastiest.
This eventuality.
Oh, the American Harlequins on the other side now.
Devoted to saving themselves from the Dark Prince, and in doing so, have found very creative ways.
Craftworld Eldar. He's calling it Craftworld Eldar.
Of Warhammer, the Craftworld Eldar are the main force of Eldar in the galaxy and represent the elf style that many think of when you think elves in space.
Specialist
Fantasy
elves.
Elves in space, not those elves. We'll get to them.
Dark
a
elves.
Craftworld is a monumentally large starship.
Really
the
big ship.
size of a continent that acts as a form of flotilla. During the highest reaches of hedonism, many Eldar saw the demonic writing on the wall and began to try and seek asylum from their
They were like,
own
we're
debauchery.
out.
Those Eldar
After
left
the
on
Exodites had gone out.
monumental craft worlds into the far reaches of the galaxy and saved themselves from Slaanesh's awakening. The main thing the Craftworld Eldar seek is to temper their minds and bodies in a way that will never allow them to slide back into their old ways. The representation they carry is that of a more feudal Japanese motif.
They do a lot of feudal Japan. If you think of like the Dire Avengers, they have a big back banner. They like spears.
And so on. These paths are a strict code of conduct to hold.
There's also a lot of Greek elements in there.
Down a school
Ancient
of
Greek stuff.
in action. And if it sounds a hell of a lot like Bushido, well, you're
And,
damn
yeah,
right. Here's
Bushido.
a medal and a soul stone. Don't lose it, or an eternity of torment awaits you. Going through these paths will allow you to take up not just a role in Eldar
Guardians.
society, but keep
Nice
your
yellow
mind
and blue.
clear from the past worries that plagued them. Every Eldar is said to be a psyker. However, very few of them actually utilize their psychic
Yeah, they're the
powers
prepper
for
elves
fear
who were
of
correct.
tempting she who thirsts. A large amount of emphasis is also put on ancestors of the Eldar and
Ooh,
learning
Swooping Hawk.
from them the farther you go down a path. This can sometimes be
Ancestors,
seen
that's
by the
another big
large
Japanese
variety
thing.
of jewels adoring the armor
That's
of
the
Eldar.
3rd
Those
edition
are called
Eldar
soul
Codex,
stones,
which
the
was called
biggest
Craftworld
middle
Eldar.
finger
That's the
to
cover art
Slaanesh
for
they
it.
can think of. See,
That's a
when
Dire
Eldar
Avenger,
dies,
that's a Harlequin.
These stones act as a backup, and instead of their souls going to Slaanesh, they are then trapped and stored in this little stone. So when the Eldar say they
But you can move the stones around. So yeah, you can attach them to your armor and then talk to your ancestors. There's also part of a short story where they go to the Infinity Circuit, and it's from the point of view, and you don't quite realize it at first, it's from the point of view of Eldar spirits within the Infinity Circuit. And they're talking about, well, do we just leave the young ones to it? Do we keep interfering? And one of them's like, I'm just going to do nothing. And then there's a call goes out saying, hey, we need help. And they want some souls who are willing to become Wraithguard. And one of the souls is like, yeah, I'm going to go and help. you know,
generations
we
before
can
them
do this.
are stored
Other races
here.
cannot
Often,
help their
larger
descendants.
structures may contain vast amounts of soul stone, such as the Infinity Circuit in the Craftworld
it's a cool
itself,
codex.
allowing the souls of the dead to help power their enormous starship. The young do not desire the discipline of the path, but rather their curiosity drives them to try every fruit from the tree.
Yeah, we've
Thus,
got to have the
it
path.
is
So the
that
idea
so
of
many take the path of wandering,
the paths
or
is
the
like
path of damnation in their
paths of wandering. Yeah, don't do. Actually, stick to a thing. It's basically be committed to one thing only, rather than this. Okay, we're going to go crazy and do everything and get bored and change it up. You don't want to get fixed on the path, so it's not Slaanesh. However, Eldar society also requires people to get stuck on the path, only do that one path forever, and become like so very focused on it that they can do nothing else. Eldar Exarchs of all of the Aspect Warriors are an example. So the unit champions you get for the Avengers and all of them, Swooping Hawks, Striking Scorpions, Fire Dragons, their Exarchs are people who are never going to leave the path. They're going to stay being a Fire Dragon Exarch until they die. And then they're teachers. And you get the whole, yeah, young grasshopper, come and learn how to be Swooping Hawk. Things like that. That was a very bad impression of a Japanese teacher. I'm sorry. Farseers are people who were warlocks, who got stuck in being Farseers and doing psychic stuff forever. Warlocks are people who used to be on one of the paths of the warrior, then change it up. But you also have like the path of service, so someone wants to be a really good table server, or the path of dreaming, where you just try and have lucid dreams all of the time. There's a lot. There's a lot of paths. And then you can also leave it and become a ranger or a corsair.
Played out again and again as the
and it depends on the craft worlds how really rigid you have to stick to the craft world.
These paths, when completed, allow an Eldar to move to the next one, then the next one. However, since this is the grim darkness of the world, many of these paths rely on combat. The Eldar actually
Some of them.
had
I mean,
gods
the
at
path
one
of the
point.
warrior
Cain,
is
Val,
about the only one.
Isha, Azaryan,
The
and
jar.
so on. These
Yeah,
gods are
Isha
aspects
is
of
captured
the Eldar
by
pantheon,
Nurgle.
and while many were killed in Slaanesh's creation, their teachings live on. For some, the strongest
Many of the
devotion
gods
to
were
the
destroyed.
Eldar
Gods
is
can
to
be
join
destroyed.
The Aspect Warriors and embody the
There we have
wrath
like one of
Cain,
almost all
their
of the
god
Aspect
of
Warriors.
war. While guardians
Nice
of the
artwork.
Eldar
That's been around
craft
for a
worlds
long
are
time,
more
that
akin
artwork.
to a
About
trained
20 years
militia.
that was made.
The Aspect Warriors embody a particular variant of the path.
Eldar Guardian?
Each are led by a Phoenix Lord, a name passed down from generations and embodying the
It's not just a
souls
name
of
passed
prior
down.
Phoenix Lords with each new one.
Because
the howling banshees,
the way the gems work, the soul stones, the person who wore the armor, and it's all like in the armor, because all the soul stones are attached to the armor, they will die, so Phoenix Lords can be killed. However, the next worthy person can be then, you know, like, they can put on the armor and become the Phoenix Lord and have all of the memories and understanding of all of the previous Phoenix Lords of that aspect. So Karandras, when you put on the Striking Scorpion armor, you will know all of the past people who had been Karandras.
led by Jane Czar, Fugin and his fire dragons,
Dream paths so you can
Balharoth
sleep better.
and his
That
swooping
sounds
hawks,
nice.
Or Malgan Ra and his dark reapers. Each
Is
aspect
Karandras going to
shrine
get mentioned?
carries with it the
Or now the
Eldar
Karandras is
way of
legend, does he
war.
just disappear?
Fast,
Too stealthy.
hard-hitting, and
Too stealthy for
incredibly
mainstream
tricksy,
40k
for they do
codexes.
not have the numbers to fight in any other way. The Craftworld Eldar
Standard elf
show
things.
how
Don't send
mangled an
hordes of
empire
people.
can be
I mean, you
by
can.
their own actions.
Eandon has a
They
lot,
once
had
ruled the
a lot
galaxy
of
in an
guardians.
honest,
Now Ulthwé is known as the one
non-hyperbolic
with
way,
lots of
but
guardians.
in the end, they were bested by themselves, and their most prominent remnants are forced to drift aimlessly through the galaxy, trying to save their species from extinction and resist the temptations of she who thirsts. But for some,
Don't do...
the party
Ah,
The ultimate clean is one that
the
satisfies
party
a
is the
clean
ultimate
freak.
cleaning. Can you get stuck on the path of cleaning? Maybe.
is just beginning. Deep within the webway is the city of Kamara. This dark
Yeah, it's
city
impossible,
once
and it's
existed
got
as a
like
port in the webway that
towers
allowed for
upside
ease of
down and
transport
through mirror
for the Eldar
dimensions.
between its various domains. The
Very weird.
significance of this city
That one,
meant that
yeah.
it
So you
needed to
see
be
all of these
a bit
different
more of a
towers splitting off
neutral
towers.
territory outside of the jurisdiction of general Eldar law, and therefore it was allowed to
It was a
self-govern.
trade city.
This did not go well.
It did
The
not go
Dark
well.
City became the hideaway for all manner of sin. The Eldar race slipped into debauchery on a
Dark
galactic scale
Eldar
that it birthed
Codex
a god,
art
and
from
this
3rd
was the
edition.
city
Not the
you
Codex
went to
cover,
when that
but
wasn't
within
enough
that.
for you. The convenience of being so
Dark
deep
Eldar had
within
been
the
so
webway
neglected
was that
for so
it
long.
exists as a blind
Not as
spot
long
to
as
the
like
horrors
Battle
of the
Sisters.
warp. So while the rest of the Eldar fled the
Yeah, not as long as
downfall
Battle
of their
Sisters.
species,
Because
Kamara
Dark Eldar were
kept partying.
3rd edition,
When
they were
Slaanesh was
introduced,
birthed, they
then
were
revamped in
saved
5th
the
edition.
worst of it, thanks to them being nice and
And their
neat
models
tucked
from 5th
away
edition are
inside
still
the
like the
webway.
current ones.
But only somewhat. The Dark Prince did not have a grip around their soul, but the tiniest pinky finger, and they were still pulling. But due to their excess hedonism, they found a solution to this problem.
If you do Slaanesh
they
stuff,
tormented
then
others,
Slaanesh
they
is
could
cool with it.
temporarily rejuvenate their souls and continue to cheat their inevitable death by
There was 100
placating the
house
Prince
rules to make
of
Sisters
Pleasure.
playable.
And if they
There
kept
were
this up
right
on the
dwarf
regular,
rules at the
they could
time,
effectively become
whenever they came
immortal.
out, and they were
Thus,
okay.
The Drukari
But they weren't the
were
best.
born. Unlike the more stoic
So, Dark
elves
Eldar.
you see in works of
Dark
fiction, the
Eldar.
Drukari themselves exist as a sort of analog of the more grim and fiendish elves you find in Norse and European mythology.
Creepy
The
elves.
Drukari
So like the
are
Dark
soul
elves
vampires, but
from
the more
even
basic
Thor the Dark
means to
World.
feed are hardly enough to keep them going. This desire to feed is known as the
That looks
thirst,
like
and to
Elrond,
quench it effectively,
weirdly.
they have mastered the art of
Elrond, but
biotechnology
evil.
and dark sciences to really juice themselves up on the crispy soul sprite from the vending
Tasty,
machine
tasty
called
pain
the
tokens.
Galaxy. The majority of Drukari act as pirates and raiders and slavers.
There's a lot
They
of
go
other
into
things
our
in
physical
Drukari
reality
society,
and
but
drag
so much of that
people
is
back to
slaves do it.
Kamara to commit atrocities that go beyond any imaginative.
I mean, you can have
torture
Eldar
human
slaves
can
and
think of.
Drukari
The
slaves.
are organized in
You can be
various
enslaved by
groups
yourself,
throughout
much
the
as like
city to
Skaven
accomplish
enslaved
this in a
Skaven.
more organized and extremely brutal way. The Cabals act as the main warriors of the city, led by their archons. Witches and succubi act as entertainment for Kamara in
And see murder
gladiatorial
people?
arenas, and the flesh-crafting homunculus keep the Drukari alive
Including
and discover
Raketh, who has been
ever-increasingly-
around since the like birth of Slaanesh. He has seen all of it. He was like, we partied too hard, and I want to keep that going.
more painful ways to torment their ever-increasing.
Yeah, the
large
Drukari
supply
make
of
the Dark Elves in
slaves they
fantasy
are
look
brought. The
so
Dark
tame,
Eldar see
'cause
the other
Dark
inhabitants
Elves
of the
in
galaxy as
fantasy
little more than
were like
cattle. Livestock that can be
arrogance,
brought to
the
bay
extreme
or
arrogance of
slaughtered
the elves,
at
because it
any
was an
time.
elf civil war.
Their
The Dark
fodder,
Elves and the High
however,
Elves
is
were
not meat and
basically the
muscle,
same.
but the
And then they
anguish
do
and
torture and
despair
slavery
of the
'cause
weak.
they
The
just
Dark
fancy
Eldar
it.
do indeed drink blood, but also tears, and most sustaining of all, the raw essence of pain they wring.
And then there's
out of
these
their
guys, yeah, who
captives.
just
The truth of the matter
go
is that
overboard.
Drukari sustain themselves on the suffering
Torture.
of others, not just morally but physically. Kamara is a city rife with backstabbing schemes and murder.
Mm-hmm.
It is the worst back alleys of the worst ghettos at the best of times.
I mean,
Nothing
the
is more
worst of, like,
horrifying
the
to a
posh parts of
Drukari than
London.
Death. For death will see them in the talons of Slaanesh for an eternity of torment.
But they can be
so they do
reborn.
everything they can to stop this. The homunculi covens,
Yeah, the homunculi
regrow
coven are
dead
gonna be like,
members
"Hey,
from
you're
pieces
dead.
of flesh
Come
as
back."
bargaining chips.
Depending on the quality of the homunculus is how much flesh you need to bring someone back. So there's been cases where like an Archon was obliterated into like tiny puffs of smoke, and then the followers will like hoover up the smoke and try and get it in so you have enough of a person left so that the homunculi can then turn that into the Archon again, and then you get rewarded for, you know, hoovering up blood mist. The thing is, even though there was like, if there was a head and a hand and a leg, only one of them can be regenerated into that person because there is only one soul. You can't split the soul across multiple different bodies. I don't think. There probably is an exception to that.
The succubi create grisly gladiatorial spectacles
that's a
that
howling
literally
banshee.
rejuvenate
Dead
the
howling
audience
banshee.
members as captives are murdered
their head.
for sport. To be
Helmet.
captured
Helmet.
by the Drukari
Don't get
is
captured.
one of, if not the worst fate
Don't let them
imaginable
take you alive.
in the world
That was the
of
mantra.
Warhammer 40k. In a universe built on war crimes, they are the most debased war crimers of all time. To be tortured and sacrificed in the gladiatorial arenas is a blessing, for you have escaped the fate of being in the Fleshsmiths control group, or being turned into a living and breathing piece of furniture for an Archon's quarters. In a cruel
You could
twist
become a
of
weird
fate,
hat.
a newly born Drukari does not arrive into this world loving torture. It is something they must grow to love. Grow to appreciate the suffering of other beings. And
Okay, let's talk about how Drukari are born. So there's two different kinds of Drukari, and the lore is vague on whether it's a social thing or if it's more of an actual important element. Yeah, I'll get to the Tau story. I'm going to tell the Tau story because it's a good story. I also don't want to be a chair. So we have Trueborn and not Trueborn. The Trueborn are made from well, they're more natural. They come from an Eldar womb. Two people made this person. And so they become Trueborn, and they may be better. They may have stronger souls. They may not need as much torture to be sustained. We don't know. Then you have the test tube babies. The ones that are vat grown. So the Dark Eldar are like, well, we're never going to run out of numbers. We can sort of horde mode this if we wanted. And we'll just get more and more Dark Eldar, get them up on pain. Let's go. We have a horde army if we fancy it. But they're so very isolationist and hedonism. They don't want to conquer the galaxy. That isn't a massive motivation. Because they just want to keep torture and pain. And you might as well do that in a place that's already built for organizing all that. So they don't really conquer planets in the way that any other race will. Asdrubal Vecht, the current leader, is not a Trueborn. He was grown in a vat and then became powerful. You have to be super rich and powerful to take on the vulnerability of pregnancy and raising an infant. Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. So it might be more of a social status thing to be a Trueborn and therefore be in a great and powerful family compared to being a test tube baby. Yeah, running the galaxy takes a lot of time. It's busy. I'm bored now. Someone else take over. Yeah, so them meeting the Tau is a whole thing, because the Tau are like, well, here's this new race. Let's extend the cloven hoof of friendship. The weird Tau four-fingered hand of friendship. And the Drukari are like, okay, yeah, let's do a cultural exchange. Let's find out about stuff, how it all works. So they swapped a bunch of people, and then a few years later, the Drukari attacked. They attacked the Tau, and the people who had been like the Drukari in the settlement were like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Hey, I'm just enjoying the Tau flavored biscuits. These little wafers that you give out. They're great. I'm just loving these. Don't know what all these Dark Eldar are doing. And among them were a lot of weird homunculus coven creatures. They were the Tau that had been exchanged culturally. I was like, hey, yeah, that guy that you knew, Jim the Tau, well, his spine is now 10 foot tall and covered in poisons. And he wants to eat you. It was a messy time. The Drukari were like, this is hilarious. Okay, we've had fun with that. Let's go. Doesn't it also take a long time for an Eldar to have a child? Who knows what the, conception rate is, but assuming more elfy logic, yes, it does take a long time to birth an Eldar child. Also, there's an idea that maybe you need to not only do the Slanesh deed, you also need to love your partner to make a child. That may have come up in some of the stories, but as I've said at the start, 40k lore is inconsistent at the best of times.
In order to survive in the world they have been brought into. If they succeed, they become some of the worst monsters in the known galaxy. A dark reflection to the Craftworlders, and a taste
the Craftworlders can be
what
pretty
Eldar
nasty as
society
well.
was like before the fall. If they do not succeed, they must find purchase elsewhere. Often those will join smaller parts of Eldar society like the Exodites or the Harlequins. Exodites believe in a pre-industrial variant of their society, often retreating to more lush worlds,
Wood elves
ride
with
dinosaurs and
dinosaurs.
live off the land. Prehistoric style that I would normally laugh at if they weren't riding dinosaurs like ballers. The Harlequin dancing troupe are a subsect of Eldar.
And you also get the pirates, the Corsairs. A lot of Dark Eldar will join them. And so the Corsairs have models. They used to have them in the Forge World range, which was Games Workshop's company within a company. Yeah, we need tabletop exercises. That would have been nice. Ooh, yeah. I like that idea. I like the idea of taking a Crusade army and saying, okay, we have this element, we'll add more in as the story develops. Good job. I like that. Yeah, this Corsairs, they have their own models. They used to have a Forge World model. Now they have one kit, which is a kill team kit, and also can be 2 different kinds of units in 40k.
That are
So,
more
space
than just
pirates,
a little
elf
strange.
space pirates.
A carnival of dancing jesters that serve the Eldar laughing god of Kegarak. They arrive never when expected and leave just as quickly. Blurs of light carry their footsteps as
Very
they
scary.
dance their foes into a grave. Combat is just as
They
much
just
of
got a
joke
kill team. No,
as it
combat
is a
patrol
play on
rules
bloody murder.
in
They
White
travel
Dwarf
and aid
510.
many other Eldar and sometimes even humanity for reasons we can never understand. Perhaps one day we would have, were they not stripped of their army book and folded into the Eldari Codex. So I suppose it'll
They've
have to
always
stay
been
a
like
mystery,
their own thing
or
and
maybe
then
it was one of
separate and then their
Kegarak's
own
master
thing and then
plans
separate.
to get back at she who thirsts and save their species. Who could know? Perhaps it was all a sick and practical joke to Kegarak.
Okay, the Harlequins are extra horrifying. It's okay if you can put on a horror stage play and also it happens. That's the kind of thing we're thinking of with their psychedelic drugs, with them actually murdering people. They're the clown from the Terrifier films. That's the level we're on. Horrifying monsters. Yeah. Yeah, so if you think of that, and remember, if you're ever like, oh, no, they're basically like akin to the Craftworld Eldar, they perform plays within the Dark City for the Dark Eldar. It has to entertain the Dark Eldar. Whatever's going to entertain the Dark Eldar is going to be messed up.
And he would just find it very funny to watch me fumble the discussion of one human on a tiny blue planet across the galaxy.
Terra and the Imperium next?
Oh, speaking of.
Speaking of voting! There you go. We're voting for the Imperium of Man today.
Before the fall of the Eldar, Earth, or Terra as it's called, was in ruin. One
Good.
man who looks to put the pieces back together.
Fancy
Where did he
dude.
come from? We don't know.
Where did
Some
he come
say
from?
was
Where
the
did he go?
result of
Well, he's on the
early
Golden
shamans. Some say he is the final old one who escaped their species genocide. And those
You
that
didn't
are
vote for the
smartest
Emperor.
know
You
the
should have.
answer is,
Oh yeah, the
it
Harlequins
doesn't
quiz is
matter.
messed
He
up where it's
revealed himself
fancy
as
wire,
the
you stick it into
Emperor
someone,
of
flails
mankind,
around,
and he was
liquefies your
tasked with the
organs.
most monumental
Yeah, the
upheaval of
Emperor, who's
humanity
famously into
possible.
voting.
The Eldaris war
I like it with the
fluctuations had
adverts on,
turned the
it's
golden
funnier.
Age of humanity into old night. Interstellar travel cut off?
Oh yeah, Yanari
Check.
didn't get a
An
mention.
AI uprising? Check. Brand new psychers popping up and not knowing how to handle their powers? Oh, check. Demonic incursions? Check. Thousands of years this occurred, and now the Emperor of
Messed
Mankind
up
showed
stuff.
himself to put
Yeah, the Inari
pieces
was like,
back
we
together,
can go somewhere with this. We
unifying
can,
Terra under his rule.
you know,
The
fold
Emperor
all of the
founded
Eldar into one army.
Imperium of Man
Or
and
we can
ruled
just
it
leave
with
that
an
as a plot
iron
thread and pick it up
fist.
at some
He
point
was
if
the
we
supreme
want.
leader, and nothing
And they've gone
could
with that
stand
option.
against him.
They keep
He
doing
was
that.
to remove mankind
Like
from
the
the
Pariah
yoke
Nexus,
of
the
its
fourth
former
Tyrannic War.
failures, and he knew
The
he would
fourth,
be the best
third
leader
continuation
they could
War of
have
Armageddon?
because he was right. AI banned.
Alright, yeah, he might bring up
Banned.
them later in
You
like
did
part
as the
2.
Emperor told you, or his Thunder Warriors would put you in your place. That
In your
place
grave.
often being a grave.
There we are.
Now Terra was thriving.
The more
but
common thing in
humanity
skulls
needed
is
to
loose plot
reclaim
threads.
its
Yeah.
long-lost brethren
Yeah.
scattered across the
And they'll
stars.
do something with
To
them
do
if
so,
they fancy
he
it.
needed those
If
that
they
could
can think
build
of models
him
to
a
sell.
fleet truly meant for the reconquering of the galaxy. And so he turned his attention to the red planet of Mars.
So are we doing the Mechanicus? We're doing the Mechanicus.
Mars and Terra were close allies long before the Unification Wars. Mars was the first world terraformed by humanity and became what would ultimately be the first hive world, an epicenter for industry and technology. The Age of Strife did not treat the Red Planet kindly, however. Mars was cut off from Terra during this time, and the warp storms that ravaged the planet turned it into an absolute nuclear hellscape. Those who were on the surface were turned into your run-of-the-mill mutant.
I recognize them.
Survived the
that is the artwork for Big Mutants in the Eye of Terror book that came out in 2003. Eye of Terror book had 4 armies, expansions essentially. 3 of them were good. One of them was dedicated Cadian rules, which is where you got Cadian psychers, which are better than other people's psychers. There was also the conscripts in there. Then there was the Ulthway Guardian Strike Force, so you got better Guardians and they could all deep strike. There was the 13th Company of the Space Wolves, showing their true colours really, coming back as Wolfen, big werewolf dudes. Yeah, we knew they were heretics all along. And then you had the Lost and the Damned, which was aspiring champions, these big mutants who could have heavy stubbers and then they got assault. You could give them a 4+ armor save, which you did because of the way armor penetration worked at the time. They were toughness 4 with a 5+ save, meaning they could die pretty easily at bolt fire. Like all bolters were AP 5, meaning anything with a 5 or 6+ save didn't get a save. So by making them scaly, they got a 4+ save and suddenly they can survive half the bolter shots rather than they just die against the bolter shots. There was mutants. You could upgrade them to be zombies, so that was where you get your like first plague zombie poxwalkers. There was traitors, infiltrating traitor squads. There was Chaos Hounds, and there was Spawn, which were heavy support for them, whereas in like the Chaos Space Marine Codex, they were elites or fast attack. It changed up all the time. I like this artwork is the point, and it triggered memories.
Bombings they inflicted on themselves, but others were lucky enough to escape beneath the red sands in powerful fallout shelters. These became their generational habitats, but this resulted in extreme reliance on technology and those who could use it. They began to view the technology keeping them alive less as a technological advancement and more of a divine intervention, with those skilled in it as priests. The Martians began to worship the power of the machine.
The person who can make the lights work and the water work becomes powerful. Religious kind of leader.
3-in-1. The machine god, serving as the spirit who gave rise to all technologies.
So that's the motive force? Oh, the motive force is
that gives all life its ability to live, and the Omnissiah, a physical manifestation of the machine god itself. This belief began to manifest in them physically as well. What were once
yeah, toast is not turning on. Have you lit a candle of incense? So the person who knows how to fix things, it seems like a religious thing because no one else understands it. They are amazing at technology though. If you think of like some of the best tech priests around, or even the average tech priest, they're better than the best hacker that lives on the planet now. You await the day you're seen as a priest. Well, if it's, you know, you could turn up, fix the computer, other people don't understand how you did it, it seems holy.
The Cult Mechanicum, now the Adeptus
Red planet, wear red.
Fascinating
not all of them do that. Not all of them wear red, but generally, yeah. So they might have like cream-colored robes, but with red trim.
God's greatest accomplishment within the scope of the great work. All praise He who is 3-in-1. By giving us
I don't speak binary order every day.
He presents us with the means and opportunity to improve
very good, very good.
As is his divine plan. He grants us complex weakness so we might learn metallic strength.
I assume
to his level
the Paralympic runner is meant to be a reference to this guitar. Yeah, Riser pattern. Well, not Riser pattern. The Mechanicus of Riser do have that nice orange. And they have their own special guns.
They took one look at the glowing golden entity that showed up on their doorstep and were like, that's him. That's the guy right there. And they immediately accepted
Yeah,
him
they were
as the
allowed to say
Omnissiah.
he's like
Obviously,
a
showing
god
up and being
emperor,
called Machine
but
Jesus shortly
the
after
emperor
wiping out
didn't
all
want to start a
instances of
fight.
Non-Machine Jesus a little bit beforehand is an instance of capital H heresy, but the emperor saw the bigger picture. Were they strange with how they rubbed unguents on themselves, burned incense, and prayed
But
to
I am
machines
already
for them
saved.
to work? Sure,
Or the
but
machine
that's a
is
lot
immortal.
of production right there. So the Emperor devised the Treaty of Olympus Mons, a unifying agreement between
mountain.
Terra and Mars. And
Bolt
this
gun.
union would be permanently etched into the Aquila of the
Oh,
Imperium.
I'm sure
as the
Logar learned
two-headed
about it.
eagle.
He was
One
like,
head for
hey,
Terra,
that's
the
another
other
thing I
for
can
Mars.
incorporate into
The
my
forces
beliefs.
Of the Emperor will be supplied with all the
Oh, yeah,
technology
the
and weapons
did you
they
say the
needed
Aquila
to
has the two
reunite
heads because of that?
scattered remnants of
Let's have a
humanity. One head for Terra, the other for Mars.
Yeah, that's makes sense. I'd never heard of it like that before. I've always heard of it as the Aquila is meant to have one head looking to the future, one head looking to the past. Only one of them is meant to have an eye.
As the two-headed eagle.
So the one looking into the past is meant to have an eye because you know the past, but the one looking to the future is blind. So when you see a lot of the two-headed eagles on character models, one of them has like the hood over their head.
Head for Terra, the other for Mars. The forces of the Emperor will be supplied with all the technology.
Maybe he
and
should have been
weapons
nice
they
to his
needed
sons.
reunite
Maybe
the
if he was going to
scattered
call them his
remnants of
sons, he should have
humanity
been
under
like a
one
dad to them.
banner. And the Mechanicum of Mars will be able to keep doing what they were doing religiously and scientifically, so long as they kept up their tithes. This tithe meant total quality control over all
the heads are for
technology
Mars and
in the
Terra.
Imperium.
The
Is
eyes
it
are for
a
the
big
past and future.
spaceship?
Makes
AdMech
sense?
take care of that. Tanks? AdMech take care of that. The literal bullets in a
Stormlord?
gun, you guessed it, but unlike the factories of today, the forge worlds of Mars and the creations of the Mechanicum are a
The ultimate clean is one that
The
satisfies
forge worlds
a
of the
clean
Mechanicum
freak.
are the
I'm not
ultimate
offended.
clean.
bit of a different experience altogether. Instead of a factory on a random given
If you
world,
irradiate
the
everything,
entirety of
the
planet's
dirt
surface
is gone.
dedicated to manufacturing. But
It
that's a little tricky,
removes
isn't it?
100%
Considering that
of the
usage of
germs
Silica animus
and
or
everything else.
AI is a big no-no, and basically the largest affront to their divine machine god possible. Fortunately, there's a really neat
Okay, that's going on a
alternative
bit
that they've
too
come
long.
up with. And that's called a servitor. Incredible
Oh, there we go,
devices that
servitors.
can do anything from manufacturing, maintenance, basic door operation, even just float around like a helpful
Servo
little
skulls are
drone.
different to
It's an
servitors.
extremely easy process
Because there's
too.
a
All
totally
you need to
different
do
thing.
is
Okay, servitors are your lobotomized humans. Almost always like criminals, minor petty criminals, casual heretics, people like that. Lobotomize them, reprogram their brains to do basic tasks, away you go. Servo skulls are different. Servo skulls are more honored people. They die, they dedicate their skulls and whatever's left available of their brain function, and then they can continue to operate. So servo skulls and servitors are not the same.
take a human who is dying or preferably an enemy of the state, most likely
That one, yep.
and lobotomize them. And then reprogram their brains to do exactly what they tell you.
There we
They even
go.
got little baby versions of them.
Ooh, not quite the same. Not quite the same at all. There has been several different lore versions of the cherubs. So the cherubs were like a, hey, yeah, this child died, let's make them fly, or some such like that. Then it's more explained, no, they're deliberately vat-grown to be cherubs. You don't have, no babies were harmed in the making of the cherub. A cherub is their own thing. That one looks like a creepy old man. So there you go. And then they do minor things like carry ammunition for battle sisters, carry big sensors for battle sisters, carry even more ammunition for retributor battle sisters. Things like that. Be part of processions, like the Triumph of St. Catherine.
Hey, so now
But not
you
servitors.
can rest easy knowing that the entirety of the Imperium,
There are no criminal
because they
babies.
outlaw AI and learning new tech is heresy, is run on lobotomized slaves.
Yep.
Whether they deserve it or not is unimportant, and whether they can still keep their consciousness trapped in their own minds is another thing entirely.
So, in some of the books I've read, it was one of the horror novels. I can't remember what it was called. The idea was it was about this woman who went to pen the memoirs of an Imperial Guard general who had retired, and she had actually done some creepy warp stuff. Yeah, the Sanctifier Kill Team Cherub does have a beard and a zappy stick. Yeah, so she was doing this whole thing of like, okay, yeah, I found out that some horribleness has happened. This general did some bad stuff, and that's the reason there's a purple spot in the sky. She had a servitor, and the servitor remembered enough of their own life to override their programming and then stop this general from doing more bad stuff. So they do, in part, remember their own lives. Oh, I also remember another time. There was a servitor that manned a gun turret on I assume something like a Chimera. The person who was the tank commander of the Chimera, she said, yeah, the servitor there is my former lover who, can continue to serve me even though he was going to die. He was servitorized and keeps going. And in theory, still loves her and always seems like, yeah, the servitor shoots better when she's in the tank. Spiky. Are you ready to vote for servitorization?
Register to vote by the 11th of April. It's quick and easy.
I assume there's a council election in the UK, usually around the 1st of May.
Breaking news. Big mobile networks are raising...
Buses. Oh, it's about mobile networks, not buses. Okay.
An excerpt from the Servitor creation factories. Naked human beings were standing in a switch-packed line between
I assume this comes from the Canicus
manufacturer
Codex?
produced servitors, but it was
Every
more
vote
akin
for the
to an
Emperor.
abattoir than a workshop. Every surface was easily cleanable. Servitors with
Yeah, then being able to remember makes it worse, not better. I know.
From slit drains set into the perfectly smooth,
but potentially
slanted floors.
better.
As the line slowly
I was going to say if you
people
can't
were
feel
passed
pain,
through
but
various scanning
we just
devices.
showed an
Most
example of them being able to
mounted
feel
in
pain.
ugly, functional arches that let out a constant series of acceptance chimes. Occasionally, one would let out an angry blare, and the indicator lumens would flash red. The rejected person was then swallowed up by a trapdoor opening beneath their feet.
New Servitor
From
Kill
these
Team
pits wafted
coming
a
out,
hideous stench
fighting
and the grinding sounds of industrial
Tyrannid
mincers. One rejected
Raveners.
man grabbed onto the lip and
I'm not seeing anything that's like, you can't really have personality in a Servitor Kill Team, apart from the two leaders.
Guards lined
The Underseer and the Archaeologist, a model we've seen before.
The adepts wouldn't even waste
Oh, this is
bullets
from Flesh
on
and
these
Steel.
people.
Oh, I
The
see. I
trapdoor
understand.
flipped up,
Thank
and
you.
the next terrified person was ushered forward. Violent metal arms snatched them up and spread-eagled them in the air, and a servitor shearer shaved them all over. At another, they were subjected to a high-pressure counterseptic wash whose chemical stink made me choke from 100 feet away. More scanners, more rejects winnowed out.
Yo,
Machines
you
forcibly
think that
dressed them
Papa
in a heavy
Nurgle would
rubberized
appreciate the
garment
servitors?
common to all monotask servitors. These were saggy on them, all one size, until another process foreshrank them to fit their bodies, where metal cuffs, sockets, and collars bit into vulnerable flesh. The last few prayers gave way to screams at that
Imagine
point,
having like a
and
suit
even the
that
most
fits.
stoic shouted in pain.
Just
They were
forced to
ushered
fit your
over
body.
a floor buzzing with power that made them shriek with every footstep. What's that for? I asked. Follicular inhibitor, to stop their hair from growing, he said. Freaking sweet, Lois! As for their scientific pursuits,
You get to be
Mechanicum
bald.
believe in the preservation of knowledge.
That's the
above
Admech
all,
guy
and
from
the
Space Marine
quest
2.
to expand it. However, as opposed to just innovating and inventing on their own with their vast technological know-how, they believe that it is a form
Some
of
innovation
tech
is
mercy. You see,
occasionally
because of their
allowed, like
religious
minor
viewpoints on technology
variations, like
itself,
this
they believe
Chimera
that
has
the
an autocannon
instruction
instead of a heavy
booklet
bolter.
itself is just as holy as the Lego set it builds, and to innovate on that without the proper written knowledge is to go against the divine word of the machine god itself. All knowledge is already in the universe. You see,
That is a big thing they do. It's like, from the Unification Wars onwards, all of the knowledge is out there. We need to get it and then store it because it's ours, not necessarily use it. One of the big problems they mention in the books, like the books about the Thousand Sons, we say, okay, we need to get the stuff and then we can have it, but we don't have enough people to analyze it, so we're just storing it. For what time, for what purpose, we don't know, but we store it. Yeah, Belisarius Call is allowed to make modifications. He can do new stuff. like make new Space Marines that are better than the Emperor's Space Marines? I don't know about that. Sounds like heresy.
Simply need to rediscovering it and attempting to invent something to improve upon divinity is very heretical. Prior to the Age of Strife, humanity was able to populate the stars with devices known as standard template constructs,
STCs.
or STCs. These devices were, as far as we know, supercomputers with the ability to pull up and detail how to create literally anything a startup colony would need. Essentially,
it's like, it doesn't make anything, but say you had the Lehman Russ STC. Whatever planet you are on, it will explain how to get to the step where you can make a Lehman Russ. So if it was, let's say it made toasters, the STC of toasters. So the first thing it does is say, okay, we need to figure out fuel sources. Then we'll get industrialization going. And then we'll expand industrialization so you can make factories. And then you can make wires. And then you can make electricity work. And then you have something akin to steel. So you can make, or plastic, whatever it is, to make the housing for the toaster. And then you have a toaster. The value of an STC isn't just that it makes toasters. It's that it expands the planet's whole economic base, industrialization level, and raises it up to the point where they can make toasters. Or Lehman Russ battle tanks, depending on the fuel that they use. It'll all be local fuel.
Actually, they were devices with the entirety of human technological know-how so that you could make a home away from home. The Mechanicum will not make
Terraform a planet
without an STC. Quite literally nothing. Because this is the knowledge they seek, and that knowledge is divine. One time, scouts of the Imperial Guard found a functioning STC that provided the schematics on a knife that happened to be a bit lighter and a bit sharper than most other knives. These knives were adopted by 30 Space Marine chapters and were one of the most advanced discoveries of the century. This discovery was so significant that they were each awarded a planet for finding this.
Lehman Russ battle toasters. They were each awarded some juice. They really want me to buy juice.
Planet for a machine that taught them how to make knives. Due to their religious organization, you can probably guess the Mechanicum are organized in a feudal structure with the highest individuals in power being a part of the priesthood. Cream of the crop being the fabricator general of Mars itself, who serves as a high lord of Terra, but also oversees the entirety of the Mechanicum below. Below them
has the mind to do it.
Oversee the cult for the quest of
and you have so many kinds of tech priests. Archaeologist tech priests, expansion tech priests, fighty tech priests, sort of.
Some power struggles within the Mechanicum because, you know, despite them all being weird robots, they love being given praise. And despite being the manufacturer,
there's always got to be infighting and civil war potential.
Military forces. They have the Skitarii private army and all their various
it's a lot of
1920s Martian style mechanisms like doom crawlers, Castellan robots, and of course the Titan legions. Because nothing is cooler than a robot that towers over buildings. Ultimately, their very dogmatic view on technology as a whole has resulted in any innovation
machine spirit demands juice.
Causing the Imperium
or
to
oil.
As a whole.
Oil must have oil. Oh, Kevin, you're always on about your oil, you normal human, you.
Tries leads to things becoming derelict. I grow weary of this flesh I was born into. Strangely disgusted.
How is he not going to do the quote of like?
I crave only the cold, clean certainty.
It's a variation of the one we all know.
That I might become one with the blessed machine. I do not expect you to understand, you who cling to your flesh as if it were immortal, seeking only to preserve it, to protect it. One day you will see the folly of your ways, and then no doubt you will come begging to my order to preserve.
But I am
already
already
the groundwork
saved.
had been set unification-wise, it was time to start getting things together for the Emperor's Great Crusade.
Okay, so we're back in like the 30th millennium.
Humanity under one banner. The Thunder Warriors were a perfect fighting force for unifying Terra and Luna, but the galaxy was a whole different
Luna
thing.
being the moon.
These warriors weren't soldiers in the eyes of the Emperor. They were tools, extremely blunt tools used for the fast conquest of Terra.
Well, it was first edition.
The tools you use at home
coffee.
aren't the
Not
same
juice.
ones you take on a
Coffee.
road trip. So the Emperor rid himself of his tools in the exact manner you think he did, and he went forward to crafting a brand new tool. one more mobile, more efficient, and ready for his next era of conquest. They shall be my finest warriors,
Space
these men
Marines.
who give of themselves to me. Like clay, I shall mold them, and in the
Register to vote by the 11th of April.
Like clay, I shall mold them, and like voters, they shall vote, and like juice, I will squeeze them.
furnace of war forge them. They will be of iron will and steely muscle. In
Excellent.
great armor shall I clad them, and with the mightiest
Fancy
guns
Terminator
will they
armor?
be armed. They will be
Yeah, vote for the
untouched by
Space
plague or
Marines.
disease. No sickness will blight them. They will have tactics, strategies, and machines so that no foe can best them in battle. They will be my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They
Yeah, there's not
are
a,
my
maybe there's a targeted ad, so it's just it's always going to be juice and voting. It really wants me to
and they
vote
shall
and drink
know
juice.
no fear. The vastness of the Milky Way galaxy meant that the Emperor needed assistance bringing everyone back to the fold.
You mean he
And who
can't do
better
it
to
all
do this
himself?
than himself. But since the
Oh, he can do it
technology
himself.
be in
He's
many
gonna lead the
places at
Great
once does not
Crusade.
exist anymore, the Emperor decided that it was time to
Ooh.
become a dad, the same way Geppetto did, and with far less
Gonna
care.
make some
It is
people.
not my son, Arkin. None of them are. They are warlords.
Oh, well, why do you
generals,
call them
tools
occasionally
bred to
my
serve a
son?
purpose, just as legions were bred to serve a purpose.
'Cause, you
Or
know, that's gonna
that
give
the
them
Primarch
mixed
Project
messages.
Was started to create charismatic and unique leaders in the Imperial
Do
military.
they all have
The
charisma?
diversity of
Maybe.
these eventual leaders meant that each one could be
Drink
specialized for
rather than
certain
going into the pain
circumstances
glove, you
across
drink the
galaxy.
pain juice.
Depending on the type of conflict, one leader might be better than the other.
The
So
no
instead of
sickness will
forcing
blight
one
them is
leader
like,
to acclimate to a
they're not gonna
situation
die from the
directly,
disease,
it would be
but it's
better to
gonna
send a
hurt.
specialized leader and forced to handle it. In order to do this, the Emperor used his genetic know-how and maybe a little bit of that
Maybe that's like a
stuff
game of subs you
to
could have.
create
The
these
18
genetically
legions.
perfect gene fathers that had the ability to serve as his analog directly, and also serve as the leaders of the respective Space Marine legions. All 20,
So the legions set
all
out-
18, that's right, all 19 of his sons
19?
were meant to be directly
Oh, you're doing
molded
Alfarius
by the
twice for
Emperor
Omegon.
himself, despite
assume
their
so.
genetic differences.
I've used
And
that
they
artwork
go
before.
as follows in order: Lionel Johnson, Fulgrim, Percheron,
I am not a
Jackie
god, give
Khan,
mixed
Lehman
messages.
Russ, Rover
Yeah.
Born, Conrad Kurz,
Yep.
Sanguinius, Ferris Manus, Angron, Robute Gilliman, Mortarion, Magnus the Red, Horace Lupercal, Lorgar.
I like a lot of the
Elliot,
artwork of them,
Vulcan,
like,
Corvus
in their
Corax,
home
and
planet.
Alfarius and Omegon. His
Yeah, so
sons,
he's doing Alfarius
vitalized
and Omegon.
crafted to
As,
be the
like,
warriors he
twins,
needed them
they're
to be,
two,
were
but they're also
complete. But he
one.
may have decided to do
Only
a
one of them's really the
bit of
Primarch,
dabbling
or is
with
he-
things he shouldn't have.
Does it
and
matter?
paid a price.
No.
Before the Primarchs were ready to go, an intervention by the gods of chaos prevented his plan
First
from
Heretic
being
book
completed
kind of
as
explains it,
intended.
sort
Though
of.
the sources vary, the ultimate result
First
of the
Heretic
Chaos
book.
God intervention was that all of the Emperor's tools were scattered throughout the galaxy at unknown places and times. Each one of his
Primarchs
sons
get all over the
ended up
place.
in a completely different world, and instead of being able to directly influence their upbringing, these children were instead forced to experience the unique nature of their respective homeworlds.
Oh boy, I hope the Imperium's a really great place and everything is fine on every planet.
Some had a great time and lived in general luxury.
I wouldn't put Sanguinius as the general luxury one. Baal is not a nice place. It is irradiated. There are mutants everywhere. He was seen as one of the mutants in the first place because, you know, the wings. Kind of mutanty.
Others
Others get juice. Some had luxury. Others had juice.
not so much.
There we
Despite
go.
His closest advisor,
The fighting pits with Angron.
saying, "All right, Chief, let's try this one again." The Emperor sensed each of his sons
Gotta catch all
were
of the
still very much
Primarchs.
alive, and one of the primary objectives of the Great Crusade shifted to reclaiming each
mean,
of
Robute
his
Gilliman
sons
had a
so
pretty
they
good
could take
upbringing.
command of
It was
their
nice on
specific
Macragge.
Space Marine legions and carry out his will. These original Space Marine legions that were created alongside their Primarchs go in order: the Dark Angels, Emperor's Children, Iron Warriors, White Scars, Space Wolves,
Fancy.
Imperial Fists, Night Lords,
I like that artwork
Blood
for the Imperial
Angels,
Fists.
Iron Hands, World
Blood
Eaters,
Angels are good.
Ultramarines, Death Guard. whoosh. Thousand Sons, Luna Wolves, eventually Sons of Horus, the Word Bearers,
Well, it says here that we're
Raven
called
Guard, and the
the Black
Legion.
Legion.
Space Marines,
Not the Sons of
unlike their
Horus
gene
and
fathers,
Luna
the
Wolves.
Primarchs are not made in a vat. There is a process to recruit more members from
Are we going to do all of the
humanity
organs?
itself, which seems a bit strange considering
Oh, we're doing
how
recruitment.
massive a Space Marine is compared to a normal man. But don't forget, the Emperor is really good with genetics.
Astartes. That's all from Astartes
Let's
2.
go with
Well, the
anesthetic,
trailer
however.
for
These
Astartes 2.
prospects are recruited across humanity from various reasons and methods, and are generally killed
Hunger Games.
during that process.
They do Hunger
but
Games.
Sometimes they aren't, and they are able to go through more and more of the actual training to assess certain
You're never able
traits
to
that are
identify
important
legions
and
by the
relevant
number?
to being a
Yeah, I
space
find
marine.
it
Most of the time
kinda
the common
confusing. I remember, like, the
factor is a
20th,
pure,
the
unrelenting
19th, the
willingness
1st.
to kill the enemies of the
That's
Imperium.
about it.
After going through psychological screening, the prospect, now called a neophyte, goes under the knife to become a space marine. And here is a
if the
quick
Emperor
list
didn't
of all
search
the
for his
cool
sons,
new
would they
stuff
get known on the scale of the
genuinely
Imperium?
Shoved into
Maybe?
their bodies. A secondary heart,
Maybe.
an organ that makes your bones grow, an organ that makes your muscles big, an implant that makes your blood stronger, a little organ that turns your white blood cells into super white blood cells, a brain implant that
You've
allows you
got-
to sleep while being awake, a
Yeah,
pre-stomach
fancy
that
organs.
allows you to digest literally anything, a spinal implant
third
that allows
lung?
you to absorb the genetic memories of what you eat,
Yep,
bigger
you
and
got the eat
better
people.
lungs
Oh,
that
you got
can
the
let
lung.
you breathe underwater, an implant that gives you stronger eyes, new ears that keep you from being dizzy, a brain
The second and the
implant that
11th,
lets
the
you go
missing
into
ones,
suspended
yeah.
animation if you're in a bad shape, skin that acts like transition glasses, I almost got it in one take, a brand new kidney, the ability to taste the air and find enemies like a bloodhound, a special
Nurgle's
coating
number
on
but
your
twice.
skin
Very good.
that allows you to be protected in space,
But then the
ability
World
to
Eaters are
spit
not
acid, a gland that allows you to absorb the
the 8th,
genetic
the 16th.
makeup from the gene seed in
No,
the
and I mean, the Emperor's
first
Children's the
place,
third,
and
so
a
that doesn't quite work.
straight-up
Maybe it's just the Death
carapace
Guard
that
have the
allows
special one.
Space Marine to interface with their power armor directly. Quite often, these
Gotta
are
have the
put
black
inside
carapace.
of you at dubious levels of mental alertness and dubious levels of anesthetic. After
lot of
more
surgery
generalized
done
indoctrination
at
into the
relative
faith
times
of the Imperium
when you're a scout.
and a bit more training and other important manners, they can finally be welcomed.
Oh, I was in the trailer
fully-fledged
that they thought the
Space
Death Guard were the
Marine.
7th. Right,
A Space
I
Marine
see,
is
I
quite
see.
literally a walking tank that is armed to the teeth. Two of the
Space
more
Marines are
iconic
either
weapons held by a Space
incredibly
Marine
OP
are their
or
bolt gun, which fires
die
explosive shells the size
anyway.
of soda cans,
It
and a
depends
chainsaw,
on the
which is
different story. There's no like consistency for the power of the Space Marine. Sometimes they just like drinking juice.
The Space
Chainsaws.
Marine is clad in a colorful
Bolt guns and
carapace known
chainswords,
as
very
power
iconic
armor,
weapons.
crafted from extremely
Which is
heavy
why I
and
like
durable
that the
ceramite.
Grey
The
Hunters,
power
not that I
armor
like
of
Space Wolf
Marine
models,
protects him from
but the
any
new Grey
terrors
Hunter
he may
models have
face,
the bolt
be it
gun and the
void of
chainsword.
space itself
They are
to
Space
an
Marines.
inhospitable atmosphere. This armor combined almost biologically
They have the
with an
plot
already
armor. Oh yeah,
massive
that's an extra
physique,
thing.
makes the Space Marine an almost unstoppable fighting force. And hell, if the armor doesn't protect them enough, they can always become a walking coffin
Dreadnought?
like the dreadnoughts of the chapters are. What truly adds to it all, however,
Tactical
is the
dreadnought
sheer
armor.
difference in some of them. While a Space Marine in its own right is an indoctrinated freight train on legs, how they act can be quite different from chapter to chapter. The gene seed of a Primarch is not just helping them become big and strong, but allows them to gain certain traits from their forefathers. Everything from how they think to even slightly
have
adjusting their
fangs?
physical appearance once it's been
Like, do they have
implanted.
fangs?
The gene seed
And
can
also,
be
are they black like the Salamander's Primarch? Because not everyone on the planet of Vulcan. No, yes. Vulcan's the planet? No, Vulcan's the Primarch. Nocturne is not the planet. Where are the salamanders from? Salamander's home. Okay, it's telling me they're amphibians. That's not the correct one. Am I back on the juice? Salamanders 40k. Home world. It is Nocturne. Good. Good. Okay, Nocturne. Not everyone on Nocturne is black. There's like the range of races, like human races. Vulcan's so big. He is the tallest, I think. Yeah, there's a range of races, and then by injecting the Vulcan DNA into you, you become black. Okay,
the
good.
personality of an entire Space Marine. Take the salamanders.
Okay,
for
the
example.
salamanders. Yeah, there we go. There's a salamander. It's an amphibian, and it lives in
Salamanders
wetlands.
have a predisposition to fire. as a whole and tend to be extremely
I don't know if that's like a
large due to the
genetic
size of their
disposition
Primarch,
towards fire.
Vulcan and his enormous stature, whereas someone like Sanguinius, Primarch, Vulcan as a whole, and tend to be extremely large due to the size of their Primarch, Vulcan and his enormous stature, whereas someone like Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels, share more
sexy vampires
features and more angel-like qualities.
Angel vampires.
A gene seed is not just aspects of the Primarchs,
Alfarius on
they
top
are
of
also
Omegon is the
flaws
tallest.
too. Magnus the Red and his 1,000 Sons underwent something known as the Flesh Change, a horrifying mutation that, while it made them strong psychers, would affect their bodies so terribly that they would mutate away from humanity. Where other factions have inspiration for their culture from our real world, like the feudal Japanese of the Eldar or Egyptian style the Necrons, each
Or the
Space
Egyptian
Marine
style
tribe
1,000 Sons.
themselves carry an inspiration. The White Scars are motorcycle riding Mongolian
That is one of the
fights.
things of
These
like
Space
the
Wolves are
Legions,
Norse
why
Vikings.
they're
The
so
Dark
there are so
Angels
many
are
Space
Knights of the
Marines to
Round
play
Table,
in
and
40k,
so
the
on.
tabletop
This
game,
moves into their fighting style,
because
and
they
truthfully,
each have
there is
a
no end to
relatively
the
unique
characters and
variance that
options
in
when it
other
comes
war
to Space
games,
Marines.
that would be
Space
it.
Marines
There
are
would
the
just be,
main
okay, I'm
symbol
describing
you
Horus
see,
Heresy.
and while
It's
many
just,
of them can be simply
here's your
indoctrinated
same
warriors
army,
who
but
only
with
care
slight
about
variation.
conflict and can be quite boring. Then you meet Dante, or Bjorn, or Argel Tal, or Karn, or
Argel
Lucius,
Tal?
or Erebus. And then you discover the wealth of these characters and tools of war you can have. For 1,100 years,
Fancy.
I have fought and I have seen the darkness in our galaxy. I have seen the vileness
The
of
black
the
dragons
alien
are all
and the
white, okay.
heresy of the
And
mutant.
also have
I
bone,
witnessed the sin
like,
of
wrist
possession,
things.
and I've seen all the evil that the galaxy harbors. And I've
No, I don't think they were going to, you know,
whose
where the Blood
presence
Ravens really come
defiles
from.
the Emperor.
Whether they're 1,000 Sons, Gene Seed or not. Or if they're just made of juice.
Maxley just tipped
I have
10.
seen what you will see. I have fought
Thank
what
you,
must
Maxley.
fight, and I have slain
Thank you
what
very
you
much.
must slay. So fear not and be proud, for we are the sons of Sanguinius, the protectors of
Yeah, you got your
mankind.
vampire Space Marines, you got your werewolf
We are
Space
indeed
Marines,
the
you got your Knight
angels
Space
of
Marines.
death. Despite being
Psychic
the
Space
poster
Marines.
children for Warhammer 40k as a whole, the presence of a Space Marine is a rare sight for the countless trillions of humans across the
Fancy
galaxy.
fighting.
Seeing one of these monstrosities is like seeing something akin to an angel sent by the Emperor
Goth
himself.
Space Marines,
These
yeah.
angels of death are the essential fighting force to bring humanity back under the unified banner of the Imperium. Yet ultimately, the Space Marines are individuals torn from their families and conscripted to genetic modification and
Murderers.
lifelong service for the dying Imperium. And though they are held in an almost holy light, most believe they are above and beyond the people they are designed to
How many of them
serve.
care about
Once
civilians?
designed
I
as
know there's the
protectors of humanity,
Salamanders, there's
they
the
seldom
Ultramarines
view
a
humanity
bit,
as something
but not
worth saving,
necessarily.
to the extent that it is a tiny,
They like
minute
to do their
rarity,
job.
though not unheard of, for a Space Marine to put a normal citizen above them in any way. For most
Yeah, it's just the
Space Marines and
Salamanders.
even their Primarchs, they are
Plots and
only
background
here to
story.
do
People
a
are like,
job.
hey, the
They are
Salamanders
there
really
to
love
kill
civilians.
the enemies of humanity, and I would be remiss if I didn't add at least one more of my favorite quotes to the tail end of this section. The time for speeches is done, said Rogel Dorn.
I was going to
The
say, is this
first great
Rogel Dawn?
test
It
is
sounds like
here.
Rogel Dawn's
My
speech.
order to you all is simple, yet heed it
Kill
well,
them all?
and exert yourselves to see it done. They are coming.
Yeah.
Kill them all.
Kill them all.
Well, the Space Marines are the spearhead of the Imperium's Great
Okay,
Crusade.
yeah, there's
and also
quite a few of them
major
are like,
player in
hey,
its
we should
warfare.
maybe
There is
protect
a
the
significant
Imperium,
amount of
or at least the
importance that must be
civilians,
taken on
even
their
if you don't like the
strengths.
dogma of the
What
Imperium.
sci-fi universe would be complete without its navy? When you think of the navy or ships on the open sea,
I mean, the Imperial
you think of
Navy
something that is
doesn't have much in the way of
sleek,
models
something
apart
mobile, and
from the
something
Imperial Agents.
pretty
Then
big.
you've
For
got a few
perspective,
kill
the
teams.
longest self-propelled ship
You got the
in
Voidsmen,
history
you
was
got the Voidsmen at Arms.
TTC-Wise Giant, an oil
That's about
tanker
it.
that was
You
about
got your Rogue Trader model.
458 meters long or over about
Big
1,500
boat.
feet.
Nice boat.
This right here is child's play in the world of 40k ships. A ship that is considered to be an escort vessel in the Imperium is about 3 times the size of a sea-wise giant, and the size of the ships only
They're
go
really
up
big.
from there.
If
The
you
most
do the
common
whole
ships
thing of
are
like
the
Star
cruisers.
Wars
The light
versus
cruiser
40k,
tends to average at about
40k
2
wins
kilometers
because of the
long,
size
or
of the
just over a
ships.
mile in length, where the Dictator class cruisers
mean,
can be over 3 kilometers or 2 miles in length. The largest ships are
Yeah,
your battleships.
the
and they
battleships are
are
probably, like,
tremendous. We're talking
on
5
par with
mile
the Death
long,
Star.
half a mile high monstrosities that look like gigantic Gothic cathedrals.
It
and
is a
filled
Gothic
to the
cathedral.
brim with
It's a
weapons.
Gothic cathedral
And
in
not only are they
space
filled with
with
weapons,
guns.
but they are also jam-packed with crewmen. Battleships tend to, on average, carry a crew between several thousand to several million, and they need every single one
Is it
of
a
those
ship measuring
members
competition?
because we don't have
Kinda.
advanced technology
With the
for other
firepower of
things to
figuring out,
pilot
it's not just like,
themselves
oh,
or
here,
control
we fired a
themselves
few
in
lasers.
meaningful way, 'cause there's
The
no
spaceships in
AI.
40k
A lot of this stuff
fire
has to be
nukes,
done
multiple nukes.
manually. Even the reloading of those giant batteries is a form of manual labor.
So that information about it being like a manual labor gun comes from 3rd edition of 40k when it started to get more grim derp. It's like everything has to be so extreme that it's stupid. They have chains and working mechanisms. You just need to have people move a great big crank to do it. They also had this information in the Battlefleet Gothic core rules, back when a rule book was like, here's the rules, and also all the background stuff, and information on all the factions, and here's, you know, the roster to use all the models and the points. Now we have that in 10th edition with a PDF of the core rules. Nowhere in like that you get the fluff of it. So you have to buy the codexes to get the fluff of an army, then you get all of the data sheets, and then the points are in a separate PDF document that you have to download.
And, of course,
but 3rd
generally
edition was
speaking,
silly.
gliding
Oh,
through
and
the
in Kill
stars is a
Team we
very
now have the
slow way
Great
to do
Gun,
things.
so
And
it's
let's
going
be
through
honest,
the
there
different
can't be a
processes of
science fiction
moving the
setting without
ammunition
some form of
manually,
hyperspace travel.
escorting the
This form
ammunition
of
with
travel in
praying
40K
people,
is less like going to
firing
Plaid
the
in
gun,
Spaceballs and more like going
and
into
then more
Davy
press.
Jones' zipper dimension in SpongeBob.
Oh, now what? I suppose you're gonna show me. Oh, gee, that's very nice. Oh, what is this? Some kind of magic act?
It's better outside. With
It's so scary. Pizza. Yeah, we're firing shells the size of buildings. At least with the Great Gun, it's like, boom, you can shoot a moon. The moon is dead.
By a navigator, which is an abhuman.
Oh, the Death Star is even bigger.
And they have a gene that gives them a third eye and the ability to help steer the ship through the warp. Which,
the Star
as we
Destroyers are
know,
the smaller
is
ones.
Hell
Yeah.
itself and
I
unreality.
wouldn't
Now, this
want to
might sound
ram.
exceptionally
Maybe you
dangerous,
would ram the
and that's
Death
because
Star.
it is. Now, the ship does
Maybe
have
you
protection
could.
in the form of a Geller field, though. Originally,
Gotta
I
keep the
assumed
Geller
the
field
Geller
on.
field is what you think it is. A large force field stopping all manner of horrible things, like demons from the warp tearing apart your ship. How wrong
I
was,
remember
though.
seeing that film.
Space
That's
travel
June,
through
the
warp
old
basically
June
involves
film.
Riding on the Sea of Souls. Hell is real and you can surf on it. So you allow the current to carry you and the navigator to direct. But how can a current of souls and unreality carry you when it doesn't obey the laws of physics, time, or, again, reality? What a Geller field is
bubble.
not a force field, but a comatose imperial
Thank you for
psyker
dropping by, Leonard.
dreaming of reality. It is not a bubble. It is a force
I kind of like the old June film
reality
as well.
being projected by mutant sleeping beauty to counteract the unreality of the warp that you can then surf on. This, of course, is not a foolproof method of travel, and Geller fields can and do collapse fairly regularly. Being subjected to the warp itself without this Geller field is a terrifying prospect. In the best case scenario, your ship will be torn to shreds.
I mean, you get a lot of
But there are
nightmares
countless
anyway.
instances of ships being thrown
And all
out
of that
the
bad
warp
stuff.
randomly throughout time itself. You leave for a 2-day mission and you come back 90 years in the past. Maybe you feel like
Time
you're
travel
lost in the
backwards
warp
was
for a
kinda rare.
century and it's only been 45 minutes. And that is only if the waves of souls don't rip your ship apart or have demons arrive on it to do unspeakable things to
And
the
then the
crew.
orcs are very
Imperial
happy because at
Navy
least they
is
get
an
to fight the demons.
astronomically
How they
powerful
get through the
force
warp, I
for the
don't know. Just
Imperium,
war
because
energy,
the sheer
the collective
volume
will of the
ships
orcs
and
puts them through the
guns
warp.
on those ships create firepower that can sunder planets. This is all juxtaposed with the sheer backwater nature of these ships. While they are manned by crews of zealots, they are also operated with such a backwater tech, it completely confuses the reader. You see the long batteries of portside cannons that the ship
That
has,
fire
and remember that
nuclear
AI is heresy in
missiles.
this world, and that all the mechanics are utilized by lobotomized slaves. So how do they load these? Well, they have gun gangs, massive gangs of hundreds of people.
Yeah, so that's from the Battlefleet Gothic Codex,
cannons.
well,
these are
core rules, where they're just moving on this
gangs
step to like turn a
that
crank.
get into gang wars and squabbles. On the ship's bridge, you may find the captain himself hardwired directly into
Plug the captain
ship's
into the
chair
Great Throne
permanently to control it the best they can. Giant screens of hololith data fill the room, and sensors across the ship are just as likely to tell you information as a serf running up to you with a scroll of parchment is. You reach to a microphone to shout orders down a hallway as paper readouts tell you information of the enemy, and holy sigils and
you've got to
candlelit
have that
incense
40k
burners gleam
vibe.
your
That's
next
the grim
move.
dark,
While
like it's the medieval in space. Oh, he's doing the
not a
Navy?
specific faction of the Imperium in the same sense and format of this video.
He's not.
It is what shepherds around the entirety of its armed forces. Every
They
Space Marine
move the
Primarch
stuff.
had a flagship, and every strike cruiser
Space
and
Marines have a
battle
small
barge has a
number of their
story
own
to tell. But if
ships,
there's a single
but
thing
mostly the Navy gets stuff. The single thing that moves the galaxy, it's the juice.
that the Shield of the Navy does the best is to help support and supply the monumental forces
Gunfire.
of the Imperium. The hammer of the Emperor himself.
The Astra Militarum?
Uncountable men
Is
and
that what we're
women
doing
of
next? The Imperial Guard. Goody, that's the proper name.
I don't care if these things have adapted to resist our las guns. If we can't kill them with our rifles, then we'll kill them with heavy bolters. And if we can't
Yeah,
kill them
it's
with
just
heavy
a few
weapons,
kill
we'll
teams
use
as an
grenades.
army.
And if
So you're
grenades
using
don't
the
work,
Imperial
then we'll
Navy.
fight them with our swords and
And
our
then you have
knives and
one
our
detachment.
bare hands. We'll drown them in our blood. That's what it means to be a soldier of the Imperial Guard. Now follow me.
Stabby time.
Charge. There is no better symbol of the might of the Imperium itself than the Astra
That's a lot of
Militarum,
guardsmen.
or as it is commonly known, the Imperial Guard. Though the Space Marines take the glory and stand as the visual representation of the Imperium, their numbers are dramatically thin and
There's like a million
specialized
Space
in
Marines.
comparison. To
There might be a
reclaim
million Imperial Guardsmen in one
you need
regiment.
a countless number of troops willing to fight and die for your
Cadians.
cause. The Imperial Guard represents
More
the Imperial
Cadians,
truth
or just maybe
made
green-colored
manifest.
people? No, it's gonna be
Every
Cadians.
year, the worlds of the Imperium pay a tithe in the form of soldiers to fight the good fight of the Emperor. And
Okay, not every planet has to pay a tithe of soldiers. There is a tithe, but you get an assignment based on what the Administratum tells you your planet is. So if you're an agri-world, you need to export so much food via the Administratum or have it logged by the Administratum to say you're feeding other planets. Hive worlds will be like, okay, your resource is people. You need to give up so many of these people into tithes of the Imperial Guard to fight in the army. Every planet also had to protect themselves and have a planetary defense force. So that's maybe where he's getting some confusion, like every planet has a tithe, every planet has to also have some soldiers. If your army, well, if your planet has a population of 1,000, you might have one platoon as the PDF. It might be 30 soldiers and a chimera, and that is it. Yeah, everything pays a tithe of some sort.
And this
But it's not
number
always
is
people.
impossible to pin down. Even saying billions would be a dramatic understatement. The sheer volume of soldiers serves as the fundamental
Marcadians?
backbone of the Imperium. 99.9% of battles fought by the Imperium are fought
I'll allow
by the
that statistic.
sundering might of the Imperial Guard. With the knowledge that the Space Marines
Space
are
Marine
essentially
from a Star Wars
sentient
2
tanks,
trailer.
what do the members of the Imperial Guard
Predator
have?
tank.
If they're the might of the Emperor himself, are they not suited up in a similar way? No.
They have
not
flak
really.
armor.
No fancy suits, no biological enhancements, and basically no expectation to live. Once a regiment of guard are activated, they are sent directly into battle with almost no expectations that they will survive. This is because, despite their training, their incredibly powerful armor, and extremely strong weapons that would crush any army of the modern day, they are so hopelessly outmatched to the things they will face.
Well, yeah, the
Sending a
horrors of the
member Guard
41st
is throwing
millennium.
a rock at a nuclear bomb. However,
Throw more
where they
rocks.
lack in
An
advancement,
avalanche.
They make up for in sheer numbers.
Yeah,
and their
an avalanche of
overwhelming
numbers.
force can be the difference maker in any deployment they face.
That's what you need, a tide of the juice.
quantity is a quality all its own.
Was that
If they
Stalin
do
or
happen
Napoleon
to
said
survive,
that?
they will be sent to the next battle and so on. Seldom do members of the Astra Militarum get old or retire, and those that do are truly to be feared. There's an old saying that the average lifespan of a guardsman is about 15 hours from deployment, and considering the average lifespan, and those that do are truly to be feared. There's an old saying that the average lifespan of a guardsman is about 15 hours from
wrong, incorrect, objection. It's not an old saying. It's not anything like that. The idea that a guardsman lives for about 15 hours comes from one book that was written in about 2005 called 15 Hours. And on the front cover, it said something like, training 4 months, travel time 3 weeks, life expectancy, title 15 Hours. This was about one planet, a war ongoing on one particular planet. There was a guardsman called Larn. He was sent there by accident. He was meant to go to a totally different place. Ended up on this planet fighting orcs in, like, trench warfare. There, the life expectancy of a new recruit sent straight to the front lines was 15 hours. There were loads of veteran guardsmen all around him that had lived for longer than 15 hours. It's in this one war zone, that one time, that it is 15 hours as a life expectancy of some Imperial Guardsmen. It is not the guard everywhere. It is not like a staple of the Imperial Guard. You're going to live for more than 15 hours. Your regiment will fight multiple battles of various sizes. And you're going to live through some of them, depends on the enemy. But you're not just limited to 15 hours of life. Yeah. Better than World War One? No, it very much depends on the battle. I mean, remember that most soldiers in World War One survived World War One, and you could have a lot of battle. It depends where you are in the First World War. Oh yeah, the 20 minuters, right? That idea that a new person sent out with limited training just to get in the air will survive about 20 minutes in combat. That wasn't the expectation. Yeah, so life expectancy 17 days in one part of the Western Front, or there was the idea that a British officer would have a life expectancy of 6 weeks because of how much they were targeted and would die in like large deployments. They would die at the same rate as every other soldier, but in between, they would be targeted by snipers. So it's not 15 hours.
Deployment, and considering the sheer number of guardsmen out there in any given battle, that number is probably accurate.
No,
when several million of your pool of guardsmen
it's not.
die.
Think about the veterans, the number of veterans that exist, the number of people that are like, oh yeah, I was there at such and such a battle. And then somehow you get veteran guardsmen because there are, data cards for veteran guardsmen. And there have been in the past. Death Corps Grenadiers are more experienced soldiers. Kazakin are an example. Yes. Okay, I'm enjoying this video. Let's keep watching and see what else I can add. Click.
Within the first few hours of combat, because the orcs threw a moon at you, it can really screw the numbers. The soldiers of the Guard are conscripted and trained on an incredible number of worlds in the Imperium, and these worlds can impact their training and their combat style directly. The most famous visually are the...
Well, not everyone's dropped into like the front line. Oh, he's remembering Cadia.
But other notable Guard factions include the gas mask-clad Death Corps of Krieg,
who were based on the Armageddon Steel Legion.
Catachan Jungle Fighters, and the Iron-Willed Mordian Iron
Oh, you got a crying
Guard.
person for the Iron Guard. Should have had like the serrated ranks of
The
people.
Indigan Prefects are a special Guard regiment that came from a planet whose planetary governor, the leader of the planet, thought it was fun to collect exotic animals, which then crossbreed
Oh, they're the monster
and then
hunters.
became the giant freight train-sized monsters destroying the planet. So the Indigan Prefects are specialized for big
They use
monsters.
the Skitarii helmets from
Hello, Tyranids.
Skitari
One
puddles.
particularly interesting officer in the
Commissars.
Guard is the enforcement officer known as the Commissar, and they are one of the more visually striking members of a regiment. These are specialized Imperial officers and act as morale officers, but instead of singing songs,
Yeah,
or
if the most
troops and providing
extreme
hot meals,
situations in
Commissars
Stalingrad
are
was
there to
24
make sure that
hours.
the members of the regiment continue to fight
But
to the
remember,
bitter
you may have been a
end.
soldier
If
for
does not
longer
meet
than
the
that.
standards of the Commissar, the solution is simple. There are trillions of other soldiers out there.
Not every day is
We don't
Stalingrad
really
in the
need
41st
you.
millennium.
Combat fatigue, headshot. Concerns about the conflict, headshot. Fleeing the battlefield,
That's a
bet
headshot.
That's a headshot.
Oh, yeah.
Considering that these officers tend to be outside of their regiment, feelings on them can be mixed. And
'Cause they're from
in
the Order
fairness,
Perfectus. They
certain
went to
commissars,
private
like
school.
the esteemed Ibram Gaunt or Caiaphas Cain, tend to do a bit
Fancy
better
Caiaphas
with the
Cain.
whole people talking part. Because if, say, you were trying to tell a beefed up Catachan jungle fighter what to
It
do,
was always the
you might
Catachans
take
who
a
were the
mysterious leave
exception.
of absence inside a carnivorous plant. But no matter what I say, I don't think I can truly convey the sheer might.
The ultimate clean is one that satisfies
I cannot
a clean
explain the
freak.
might of the
I'm not
ultimate
offended.
clean.
Of the Imperial Guard, so I'm gonna get a visual aid. Let's take a look at this image.
Yeah, the Armageddon
here,
Steel
right?
Legion
This
have been
is the
fighting for a
cover
long time.
Of the 9th edition
And
Codex for
I
the
don't know whether I like
Militarum,
World
the
War One or World
official
War Two Germans. I
cover
go with the
art.
World War
Your
One.
eyes may be drawn to the dark and brutal looks of some of the main members on the front and the gigantic orc they are attacking. But zoom out a little bit. There is no floor.
That's
There is
people.
only people, and behind those people
And tanks,
are
Rogel Dawn
tanks.
tanks.
And behind those
That was our
tanks
first look at
are
the Rogel
flying
Dawn tanks
artillery shells.
in,
There are
like,
two
artwork.
enormous transport ships in the sky, and their ramps are down, and on their ramps are more people. The Imperium is described as having 1,000,000 worlds. 1,000,000 worlds, and each one of them gives soldiers to the Imperial Guard for the tithe. On a given battlefield, in a given fight, foot
Like more
soldiers
blue than
number
the
in the
tan? Yeah,
millions,
yeah.
tanks in the tens of thousands, and you have enough artillery to turn the night sky day. You have walkers and APCs and aircraft and
There we go.
horse cavalry.
First edition
and
Imperial
tanks
Army.
the size of apartment buildings. You have drop troops and spec ops and rattling snipers and gigantic
Halfling
ogres that can't
snipers.
count to 4, but they can turn you into 4 pieces, and it just doesn't end. Humanity is a horde army, but instead of a horde of bugs or
Is that
rampaging
total
orcs, it's
realistic
a
battle
living
simulator?
wall of guns. At the end of the day, though he's been ferried through hell on a ship that's 10,000 years old to some godforsaken war-torn rock, though he deployed from high orbit with nothing but a grav chute, though he is one of 10 million men and women snatched from his
gonna
home
fight.
world to fight a war he barely understands, though he has been
Humans
given
are
a
40k
weapon to
Skaven,
fire
wave
small
tactics,
suns and may
weapons they
annihilate
barely
him as he
understand,
fires,
tunneling
because the knowledge of how
sometimes,
it functions has
mutant
been
support,
lost,
friendly
though his
fire,
company is supported
uncaring
by
generals.
tractor tanks
Yeah.
that run on anything you can burn.
Humans are
Though
40k Skaven.
He wages war against the devouring hive
Or you can say
mind,
Gene Stealer
ravenous
cult for,
demons
like,
and
the
hordes
deep
of
striking and the
hyper-advanced
tunneling
aliens with strange
and the horde,
technologies and sorceries
and
he
not
never
caring if you shoot your own
dreamed
people,
existed.
because there's always more cultists.
No one will remember his sacrifice. There will be no records of his deeds, no glorious parades
Spelling
in his
demons
honor,
like that on
and
the
no
page
remembrance
without the
of his name.
AE.
All he will earn is a shallow, unmarked grave on a forgotten world.
Humans are the less
untold
funny
light years
version
from
of
home.
Skaven.
Yet
Yeah.
for all this thankless sacrifice,
Skaven
a
is so
guardsman
silly.
is a man, just like you.
Oh yeah, the
He
warp
has
travel.
No
Yeah.
millennia-old genetic
No
engineering,
holes.
no prophetic leader, no miracles of faith.
Rather than
He has his last
teleportation
gun,
that the other
his
people do.
orders, and those beside him. He is the Imperial Guard, and he will hold the line.
Hold the
In
line.
the end, the Astra Militarum, despite fighting for the honor of the Imperium, are their own form of a massive horde army, where individuality does
It's a lot of
not
models for the
They are
Imperial
merely
Guard to
numbers
have an
the
army.
Imperium, and the vast majority of the conflicts they are sent to are attrition-based
Unless you do
battles that gain
tanks.
virtually no ground, while countless millions die. Yet this makes
It's
them
important to
the
fight
most
these,
human,
like,
for the
pointless
Imperial
war
Guard
things.
contains no
I mean, okay, if you think of like pointless attritional war in our own timeline, we've mentioned World War One. The Battle of the Somme, where you had regiments going over the top, British regiments, and 90% of them would be killed, but then the next day another regiment would have to go over the top. That seems like pointless slaughter. However, by doing that, it meant that the Germans had to move troops away from Verdun, and so the French could survive at Verdun. If the French don't survive at Verdun, it's disaster for the war. And there were more Germans killed than British soldiers and French soldiers during the Battle of the Somme. So even though they were on the defensive, where you think, well, they've got the trenches and the machine guns and all that, there's still massive death. More massive death. So it is, even in the 41st millennium, unless you're doing one of the silly things like, oh, that time when an Imperial Guard regiment was dropped against the Tyranids and all of their orders were received all at once, and they had to follow them not in order, but immediately. So it's like, charge, take cover, fire orbital strike, release the basilisks, retreat, not retreat, pull back, okay, pack up the basilisks and go home, complete final result, then charge again. That was one of the silly times that they were like, oh yeah, they all got eaten immediately. But it rarely happens exactly like that.
People who are happy and sad, people who laugh and love.
Imperial Guardsmen do make good stories for the Black Library novels.
Strength in facing the horrors of the universe head on with nothing but
who has had multiple different models in the Black Library
armed with an
range of
amount of
models,
soldiers and space marines,
like Celestian Superior Avalon.
Great Crusade into the stars to rescue the stranded Primarchs and reunite them to their legions. But the biggest question needed to be asked was, what would they find? The Age of Strife lasted for thousands of years. If a civilization was still alive out there in the galaxy, what would they be like? The technological advancements of humanity prior to and during the Dark Age technology was unfathomable. It allowed them to spread
it was
the galaxy
beyond
with
fathom.
ease and allowed them to settle once inhospitable planets. These branches of humanity were provided with the vast knowledge of human creations and were given gigantic machines to make arduous labor and ease.
Is this the Imperial Knights?
These massive colony ships was known as the Long March, and these ships would be retrofitted into settlements upon arrival to their new homes. Accompanying them were the gigantic pieces of farm equipment that served multiple purposes and the specialized pilots.
Oh yeah, warfare is not a good thing. No one wants to do a war. Well, no one should want to do a war. But within a war, even the most stupid, messy war, there's a reason for the battle taking place.
Because of the significance of these machines, those that could pilot them were powerful enough.
And it depends what you want to play on the tabletop, whether it's like, hey, I want to be a noble Imperial Guard regiment doing valuable work, or I want to be like pointlessly sent into slaughter.
Over the thousands of years would eventually be known as
the ultimate clean is one that satisfies a clean
known as the ultimate clean, or the Imperial Knights. I think he's got it set up so that the timestamps just before like a new section is when the adverts come in.
And follow deeds of glory. He must keep honor with
so he's doing more of an expansion in the Imperial Knights than in his previous video, where he's like, yeah, they're big walkers and themed around Arthurian knights. And that was about all he said.
The Age of Strife caused these colonized worlds to be cut off from the
Imperial sharks.
And the reversion of these worlds resulted
they
in
hoover up the heresy.
This farm equipment turned feudal, and the leadership that controlled the devices became viewed as a noble hierarchy. During the Age of Strife, exploratory fleets from Mars found plenty of these worlds, and it seemed the majority of them reverted to a similar state. Like
where
King
you have,
Arthur seeing Merlin
well, the
himself,
people who can maintain the Imperial Knights are very different to the, you know, the regular people. It is basically feudal worlds. The Night worlds are like feudal worlds with very little difference.
STC information, and the noble houses were provided with technological know-how and modifications from the AdMech themselves. The suits became more and more specialized, and their history as mere pieces
depends
of
on the gun you want and whether
Wars
Games Workshop lets you pair two different weapons, or it's like, no, not allowed. Can't have a flamer and a battle cannon, rapid fire battle cannon.
Ability-focused feudal hierarchy that swears fealty to either the Mechanicum or to Terra. Like the Knights in our history, once they swear fealty, they can be called to aid their respective allegiance in the heat of battle. The ones that swear fealty to Terra
got
are
your little
led
armigers,
by the High
got your knights.
Monarch,
I mean, the knights were designed for the epic scale, where they were like mini support walkers, still massive, but walkers for the knights, no, for the titans. And then we see them again in his Titanicus game as it exists now.
Pledging allegiances here and there, your run-of-the-mill War of the Roses aesthetic. Except instead of ponies, you have gigantic
War of the Roses.
machines. These knights can't simply be piloted.
I didn't know that many people knew about the War of the Roses, which was like England's Civil War, but it's not the English Civil War.
This ritual involves them sitting on the device used to control the knight, known as the Throne Mechanicum, for a full night. What's wrong with that? I mean, sitting in a chair for a full evening sounds pretty great right about now. So a pilot cannot drive a knight. They can, but it moves about as effective.
Game of Thrones made it well
Ripley
known.
from
Okay, yeah, that makes
Aliens
sense, because
2,
Game of Thrones is just the
lifter
War of the
thing.
Roses.
It is, in a sense, a beast that must be controlled, and a pilot must merge with it. The mind
The
of
OG
the noble
Laura
is
Knights
connected
is a
to the
world had
machine and
dinosaur
must
scale
fight with the
fauna,
mental
so
signatures
you
and
build suits
personalities
to
of the
move the
prior
megafauna
pilots
around.
as well.
Alright.
Everything a knight experiences in battle
That's
is
a kind of
felt by the
agriculture,
pilot
yeah.
themselves, be it the general movement in the battlefield or damage sustained by the
Heard
machine
the
itself.
20-meter
If a
tall
knight's
cows
leg is blown off in
or
battle,
groks.
the pilot could experience a broken bone in the same spot.
Oh,
The
so like
merging to the
Matrix
machine
rules
forever
apply.
changes the
If you get punched in the
mentality of
face,
noble
you
that
start bleeding.
experiences it. This connection reinforces a strong degree of nobility and honor in the
very
pilot,
cool.
and a desire to fight for the glory of their house until
Chat is really
the
cool.
bitter
Also, the
end,
video is really
as
cool.
their ancestors' minds are linked directly to the
Oh,
knight.
everyone's being
The
bothered
size
by
of
their
these knights
ancestors.
Can vary, but generally speaking,
It's
they
not
stand
just
in
the
the
Eldar.
ballpark of 30 to 50 feet tall and are protected by a thick adamantium armor. Beyond that, they have their own unique ion shield generators
have
that
heraldry,
give them added
they
protection.
have two
And when it comes
stubbers,
to their looks, the most common pattern across the
chain
Imperium is
sword.
the Questoris pattern, and is honestly the one you're probably thinking about right now. But there are also smaller versions like armigers and bigger ones known as the Dominus. As
Whereas
for
the
loadouts,
armigers
these
can
guys are
be-
essentially a
The
violent
pilots
Mr.
of the
Potato
armigers
Head.
can
Battle
have their
cannons,
minds
Gatling cannons, heavy
overridden
flamers,
by the
thermal
people in the
cannons.
bigger
Up close and
knights.
personal, how about a gigantic chainsword or a straight up?
The ultimate clean is one that satisfies.
Would you like a
clean
giant
Hey,
chainsword
I'm not
or
offended.
the ultimate cleaner?
And for that empty spot up top, screw it. More autocannons, maybe add some missiles. Whatever you can do to make it as over the top as possible, you gotta do it. A squire serves a knight,
Very cool.
a knight serves a lord serves a baron, and a baron
I
serves
don't know
a
about knights or
monarch. So who
computers that
does
never
the
had their
monarch
caches.
serve?
Oh yeah, for like
He
past
serves
users.
every subject,
Or like
from the
you log
rudest
in and
serf
it,
to the
it
members
brings
of
up
the
with so
court.
many different users. Which one are
Chivalric
you?
fealty, when ideally practiced, is not a pyramid, but a circle.
Yeah, but
Ironically, on
the armigers
surface,
can have
night
their
worlds
mind
themselves are one of the
over
least grim, dark settings
written,
in the
well,
galaxy, reverting to an ancient
controlled
time
by the
with
bigger
knights and
knights, if need
peasants
be.
is almost an escapism from the techno hell of the modern Imperium. But this, of course, doesn't make it great for everyone. It sounds fun on paper to play a game of knights, but it's not so fun when you're the peasant of that world. For the knights themselves, the knights give their entire lives to the throne Mechanicum, and their reality is not their
You
own,
live
as
in
they
the
have to
night.
hear the
Well, not
voices
quite,
of
but
thousands
almost.
of generations of their ancestors controlling their actions and their lives for as
Stop
long
being-
as they live.
stop
It's a
bothering
strange
me,
dichotomy.
Mom.
When it comes to Warhammer,
Come on, let me
most
pilot the
all
knight.
jobs tend to be terrible. However, if there was one that could be considered enjoyable, it would be the
forced
pilot of
traditions.
a knight or a princeps of their larger cousins. While it does contain an egregious amount of hardship to be a knight pilot, you do enjoy a wealth of privilege. A knight
Yeah, you
pilot
get a-
is often an
you get a
asshole
giant
who can
knight
back
suit.
it up. The
That's
rich
privilege
noble that,
enough.
despite his braggadocious behavior, is still very much him, and he will continue to be him. But knights are not the only thing that the Imperium found lost in the stars during their Great Crusade. Due to the circumstances of the Age of
Ah, the
Strife,
Votann.
humans were changing
squats.
and adapting to their new homes they
kin.
were now isolated on. Some of these humans evolved over thousands of years.
From the time
to
it looks like
adapt
this
to
is the
these
last one he's
areas,
doing.
and they
So
were
no
known as
sisters this
abhumans.
time.
Many abhumans
Next
found their
time.
way into the Imperial Guard or other lesser positions in the Imperium if they were not wiped out immediately for being too different from their human counterparts. But their abilities and appearance vary from
Some
planet to planet,
abhumans
and
are
one
allowed.
particular group of abhumans have made quite a name for
Like
themselves
these.
in the center of the galaxy.
Is it going to be juice?
ultimate
Oh,
clean is one
not
that
quite.
satisfies.
Thought it was going to be the juice that time. The Leagues of Votann.
The origins of what will be known as the kin start at some
Oh,
point
cool.
during the
You know a
Dark
lot
Age
about knights.
technology, where their ancestors left a planet that is very much Terra and went to the galactic core to mine it of its resources.
They were
brought
human.
along with them everything
But
that
now
they
they're
would need for a long
clarified as like
stay,
aliens.
most important of which
In the
were
rules, at least. They
incredible
come under
AI-based
Xenos factions. They're not
supercomputers.
Imperium,
Be it
they're not
guidance,
Chaos, so
technical or philosophical,
Xenos is where they end up.
schematics, or the ability to
It helps the
upload
Death Watch fight them.
memories of a deceased explorer to gather information from them. These computers
See,
became
the
an essential
Votann
part of
are
their
ones that
everyday
haven't had
life,
their cache
especially
clears.
considering
Because
that the
everyone that's
galactic
about to
core
die or has
is one of
died
the
gets
most
their mind
inhospitable
uploaded
places
to
in
the Votann.
galaxy. It is an
more
exceptionally
knowledge,
star-dense
but
location, full
less
of
bandwidth.
abnormalities, black holes, and sentient hostile nebula. Whatever that last part means, it is not a safe and easy
Hostile
place to make a
sentient
living, and this
labyrinth
only got
nebula.
worse thanks to the warp storms during the Age of Strife. In order to adapt to this area, these travelers perfected a genetic makeup that made their future clones to be more adept to the area.
Oh yeah, they have the weird
These
clone
future
skins, and they
clones
can
would be
adapt
shorter
it. And
and
so
more
when you buy the
robust
models,
than
you can
their
see they have
ancestors,
different,
and the
like
need
some of
to
them have different
procreate
eyes,
would
some
be
of them have different
unnecessary
heads.
because
Like they're
why risk messing
modified
up a
for
good
different
employee when you
things.
can just make a new one? These would be known as the squats, and they would all die.
Squats.
Except for when they didn't. And now they are
Yeah.
known by a different name.
They were dead.
Most void-faring races
Tyranids
have
were meant
at
to have
least
eaten
one
them,
cautionary
and then it was
tale of
retconned that
foolish
it didn't
explorers
happen,
vanishing amidst
and now
its
they're a new
blazing
thing.
stellar nurseries and strange anomalies.
strange anomalies indeed.
Leagues of Votann, the Galactic Core has been home now for millennia. These squat humanoids would begin to establish
It's nice
themselves
artwork.
in the core.
Sort
and
of.
their
I mean, I've
goals
never
would be
really
the
been
same
into
as their
space dwarves as a
ancestors.
concept.
Rock and stone! But like, actually
He
kind
said
of,
the
yeah.
thing.
Whenever one of
He
them
said
would
the
die,
thing.
they would know that that sucker would need to be uploaded to the machines
Yep,
like their
more nosy
forefathers
ancestors
did.
getting in
But
the way,
original purpose
bothering you all
of
the
these
time.
machines was lost to time. What was once
Ancestor
a
core is
technical
very
resource
important
for them
to
turned
their
into
civilization
a ritual known
anyway.
as joining the ancestors. And the fact that they were clones at this point meant that the same copy of the same individual would be uploaded countlessly. The sheer overuse of these computers and the repeated
I mean, the
uploading
clone,
of
you could in
redundant
theory
data
overwrite
has
the
turned
previous
these
person,
once
but they don't.
powerful supercomputers into your parents' computer after you installed LimeWire on it, and whose 50 Google Chrome tabs definitely contain information they will return to one day. So much corruption that these computers began
I don't
to develop
have
the
that many
makings of
tabs
a
open.
personality of their own. These would be known as the Votann, and the kin, this
I have 18
dwarf-like
tabs open,
abhuman
it's
of
fine.
humanity, would revere them. The Votann still operate to this day, but the volume of corruption have made anything outside of their very basic functions highly unpredictable. They may not answer a question for centuries at a time, and if they do provide
Yeah,
an
so the
answer or
computers are
data,
slow.
it has
Eventually
become
they'll say
so
42.
corrupted and so incongruent that it takes a literal kin wizard to comprehend it. The kin, much like the dwarves of fantasy, exist nowadays as a mercantile species that constantly work to mine and manufacture. However, their capitalistic desires are
Yeah, they do the
dangerous.
capitalism,
biggest crimes a
and
kin can
also the
face are
deals,
being lazy,
and all that sort of
unproductive,
stuff.
and breaking a contract. Stellar conflicts have broken out over hundreds of years due to the breaking of a deal. So if you
Yep.
signed a contract with a kin,
It's a lot
you
like
best
the
stick
dwarves
to it.
in Warhammer
Because of
Fantasy
this,
and
the
Age
kin
of
have been
Sigmar.
known to interact with other species in a fairly common manner. This includes humanity, who have met various members of the kin
When they've
multiple
had humans
times, but
meet
constantly
Votanns,
consider
like,
them to be all
hey,
a different
they seem
species.
kind of human,
Famously, the Imperium
which,
know that the kin
depending
they refer
on
to as
whether they
the
want to get
squats
shot or not,
were their
they'll
own
say
species
these
and were
are
wiped out
humans
by
and
the Tyranids.
abhumans,
Little did they know,
rather
they were
than
still around. The
aliens,
kin are
because you don't,
acutely aware of
you know,
two
fraternize
things.
with
The
aliens.
first is that the
Whereas the
humans of
kin are like, no,
Imperium
no,
are
we're not
deeply
human,
terrified
because
of
then the
technology.
Imperium
So the
will
sheer
want us,
existence of the
and say they
Votann
want to
is a
own all our
secret
stuff.
as well
They
as
don't
the
want
truth.
that.
This extends
Because then it's a
also
war
to
with the
Iron
Imperium
Kin,
that the kin would
sentient
lose very
robots that
quickly.
are treated in the same esteem of
Despite their
flesh
9th
and
edition
blood kin,
codex.
because kin is kin. The second thing they are aware of is where they're
And
from.
yeah,
they are
they do
fairly
Iron
confident
Kin.
that they are from Terra, and they know that if this secret was to be known by the Imperium, that the Imperium might want to take ownership of them and everything they've built.
There it
So
is.
the more alien they are, the better. Now this sounds fine and good.
Pretend
right?
to
What
be
could possibly
aliens,
be wrong with
and then
these
the
guys besides
Imperium
the hyper
doesn't
late-stage
want
space
it through
capitalism?
diplomacy,
Well, we
they
have to
just
go
take
back to
it
their
through
creation.
war.
The kin are
But
an
would they?
entirely
Yeah, they'd want
clone-based
tithes
race
anyway,
made from the
which might be
computers that are
too much than the
exceptionally
kin want to
difficult
do.
to recreate. These machines, the Votann, are becoming
You don't want to pay
more and
tithes
more
if you don't have to.
unpredictable and
That's like
derelict.
taxes.
If anything
The
were to
Votann
happen
hate
to these
taxes.
machines, it would be a twofold ending of the kin. New kin cannot be reproduced,
Kill the
reducing their
Votann.
numbers, and the existing kin would have no further purpose because the end that awaits them would be non-existent.
So their
The horror
afterlife
of the
is
kin
basically being
civilization is
uploaded
that
to the
entire
computer.
purpose of their lives is to do the best they can at their duty and upload all they know to the Votann, their ancestor cores. Join their ancestors.
Join the ancestor core.
But doing so is
Be
actually
uploaded
the thing
to the
that is
computer.
killing these supercomputers in the first place. The ancestors were dead, but through
But
the
then
first truths,
there's
their
not
legacy
enough space,
continued. And though
so they
their
can't
eyes had shut
program
long
things
ago,
as quick.
Indeed,
It's-
the ancestors were watching.
That's at least how I
Not
understand
with a
computers,
gaze
and as
from
long as that's the
eons
same
gone,
as like
but with the eyes
The
of
law
every
writers
living
understand
kin.
computers,
Each
everything is
generation was
fine.
the embodiment of the ancestors cast anew by the Votann. The galaxy changed. Stars died, planets were destroyed, and civilizations fell. But as long as the Votann endured, the ancestors still lived. I do want to end this last bit with an enjoyable quote from one Kim. As you may have assumed, the Leagues of Votann are space dwarves with a corporate sci-fi motif.
Yep, discount Infinity Circuit. Yeah, but you can't really draw them back out and into any kind of wraith construct.
They hold serious grudges.
They're definitely space libertarians.
More about your contracts than anything
They do more of a,
so
you know,
of this, they might
let the market deal with it. Also contracts and law and stuff. Yeah, they need to defrag Votann.
You misunderstand, human. I am not here to debate. I am not here to compromise. What you see as yours, I am taking for my kindred. You want to bargain? Torek, unholster our means of negotiation.
It's a
As
fight.
the Great Crusade continued, humanity would find their missing Primarchs, reestablish the locations of all of their various worlds, and finally
Imperium comes
what the
back
Emperor
together.
was always hoping for. But eventually, all the Emperor sought to build,
Except for the Horus
would be
Heresy,
his undoing.
kind of messed it
His
up.
original attempt to have all of the Primarchs lead his great armies and usher humanity into the better
I
ages
assume this is where we're going
would
to
end up
next time.
crumbling down. And we will learn about how the Imperium backslides and the horror of the modern day of 40k in part 2.
Yep.
I will see you very soon. Thank you so much for watching.
Very good. That's a good video. I like the pacing of it. It made it very simple to follow. You have almost all of the races covered in some way. We've got the Space Marines. That's the big one out of the way. Maybe the Custodes will get an extra mention. Maybe the Grey Knights will get an extra mention. We don't know if he's going to do it by the different codexes and things that are out. Because we have mentioned the Harlequins, but not so much the Exodites. So we've got Battle Sisters to do. Imperial Agents, I guess, have already been done with the mentions of the Imperial Navy and the Assassins. I mean, the Imperial Navy isn't really a faction, and especially after the Horus Heresy, because the Imperial Guard was split off from the Imperial Navy, so you can't have them together. So that if one goes traitor, you don't have someone with a massive fleet and a massive ground invasion force together. It's either a bunch of dudes on a planet who can't really leave it, or it's a fleet with no support. And demons have been mentioned enough. Chaos Knights didn't get a mention, or you may just skip them out because they are just knights, but of chaos. No, I think they'll probably get a mention in the next bit, along with all of the different kinds of legionaries. We've done Eldar and Dark Eldar, Leagues of Votann, Necrons. So there's Orcs, Genestealer Cult, Tau probably get an expansion, Tyranids as well. There's a lot to look forward to, especially the Genestealer Cult. And also the Battle Sisters. Yeah, there were no Orcs this time. So we've got to the Heresy, then we'll do the War of the Beast. So there may be an expansion on the War of the Beast. Excellent. I hope you've enjoyed it. So when part 2 is out, would you like a Von Carmian supplement on that too? Another not so much reaction, but further explanation. Basically me adding all of the footnotes and more addition to it. Would that sound fun?